Chapter 21-25, Animal Guardian Spirits. Lin Feng had already sensed Emperor Wu Tianjian's sword's life and vitality. However, it had a sword soul, and a sword soul was made out of the cultivator's soul. How could a deployment spell have a soul if a cultivator didn't grant it with a thread of his own soul? Lin Feng didn't understand. Lin Feng destroyed the spider web, despite its strength. He walked towards the spider, however, the spider opened its mandibles, and lights filled the air around him again. The energies looked sharp and deadly. They could easily cut a cultivator apart. But at his cultivation level, blades couldn't even stab him anymore. Lin Feng's hand was sharp, it seemed able to cut anything. It moved forwards, the wind whistled as the lights were cut apart. Lin Feng landed on the spider's back, driving it down to the ground with a crunch. At the same time, Lin Feng's soul strength penetrated into the spider's third eye. As expected, in the spider's brain, there was a thread of light, a spider soul. As expected, deployment beasts also have a soul. However, where does that soul come from? Is it really natural? Lin Feng doubted what the ancestor of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry had said. Of course, it was his own impression, there was no precise reason for thinking Yang Xiao was lying. There were many strong cultivators in the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. Many people had also noticed this, but they didn't question what the ancestor said. After all, in the world of cultivation, there were many things which couldn't be explained. These deployment beasts which were alive were a perfect example. Lin Feng released qi into the air. In an instant, it surrounded the spider and the spider disappeared. Since it had a soul, it could probably be controlled. Lin Feng continued walking forwards. He encountered many deployment beasts. Some of them were very strong and could also cast deployment spells, just like the spider. Those beasts' ability to cast deployment spells seemed to be innate. Lin Feng took all of them without exception. He put them all in his spirit world, he wanted to see if he'd be able to control them. Tomb. Lin Feng looked at the ground from the sky and saw a grave. There was even a gravestone. In front of it, there were deployment beasts protecting it, that's why it drew Lin Feng's attention: cyan dragon of the east, white tiger of the west, vermilion bird of the south, tortoise of the north, he murmured. That place was in the middle of the creatures. For guardian spirits protecting a gravestone, who was buried there? At this time, the four beasts were staring at some people ferociously. Those people were from the celestial remarkable deployment ministry and had come to the small world to practice. They wanted to see what was on that gravestone. Finally, someone moved towards the gravestone, but the white tiger moved to intercept and glared at that person icily. It also released a formidable power. It looked just like a guardian spirit. We're disciples of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry, we came to pray for our ancestor. Let us pass, said that strong cultivator. However, the white tiger just looked at him icily. That strong cultivator grunted icily and stretched out his hands, there was a rumble of moving energy and imprints shot towards the white tiger. The white tiger roared angrily and spat out golden lights. Explosions erupted as they met the imprints, and everything exploded. The strong cultivator grunted again and struck out with punches at the white tiger. Energy filled the air. The one who had attacked the white tiger was a great emperor who controlled Tao power, as were the others with him. They were all extremely strong. The white tiger roared, more golden lights materialized. Everything became golden around him. He looked like a king. His golden lights shot in all directions, the earth and sky trembled, those people's hearts started pounding. They were great scholars, but they couldn't cast deployment spells so quickly. However, that white tiger who was a guardian spirit with innate abilities and extremely strong. It's a great imperial deployment beast, thought the astonished Lin Feng. The white tiger was furious. The golden lights flared and turned into a curtain of light. The great emperor pulled a long face. He kept attacking, but the white tiger was still roaring furiously. Deployment lights filled the air around him, the turning into a vortex and moving towards his enemy. How terrifying! The Great Emperor isn't as strong as the tiger, observed Lin Feng. The Great Emperor also thought of casting a deployment spell, but even as deployment lights started intertwining around him, the white tiger was too fast. He roared furiously and continuously. Deployment lights were everywhere. The other great emperors all withdrew, grimacing. They had heard about these powerful guardian spirits before, everybody had told them to never offend them, but they had always had doubts. Now they could see them with their own eyes. "Should we help him?" asked one of them, as their faces stiffened. That great emperor was stuck in a deployment cage now. "Haven't you seen that the 3 other guardian spirits are eyeing us covetously?" answered one of them, watching the cyan dragon, the tortoise, and the vermilion bird carefully. The 3 guardian spirits were all extremely strong, watching the 3 as if they wanted to devour them. "Help me!" shouted the great emperor desperately. To his despair, nobody was helping him. The deployment spell was getting more and more terrifying, the great emperor's hope was evaporating. Finally, the white tiger devoured him alive. The sight was quite fearsome, especially when the white tiger with blood dripping from his jaws raised his head and looked at them. Phew, Lin Feng took a deep breath. How strong! What would have happened if I had been the great emperor? For guardian spirits, Saint Imperial marks, inherited from the great deployment master, you dared try, said Yang Shao, looking at those people indifferently. Even though we're in the Gone Ministry's paradise, there are no rules saying we can't do certain things. If we're able to do something, does anything prevent us from doing so? Someone else replied to Yang Shao. If they hadn't found the grave, never mind, but they did, and it was protected by terrifying guardian spirits, few people could compete with them. The problem is, can you defeat them? Yang Shao smiled coldly, which made those people pull long faces. Their friend had just been killed, it proved everything. Hee, Yang Shao, no need to tell us those things. If you had had the opportunity, you would have done the same. Everybody knows what kind of person you are in the celestial remarkable deployment ministry, returned that person with a knowing smile. Everybody agreed. Even the 9 supreme ministries had told their direct disciples not to touch him. Huh, you understand me. Yang Shao burst into laughter and said, you're right, if I have the opportunity, I'll kill the guardian spirits, and now I do have that opportunity. When they heard him, they frowned. Yang Shao, what do you mean? I can deal with them if you all help me, replied Yang Shao. And then, asked the crowd. They had always wanted to see what was hidden in that grave. Before, you must help me do something, said Yang Shao. What? Asked the cultivators frowning. That guy was shameless. Help me capture that guy, said Yang Shao, pointing at Lin Feng. Everybody looked at Lin Feng, not understanding. Wasting so much energy to capture an emperor. And he needed help for that. Lin Feng frowned and his eyes twinkled icily. Yang Shao was definitely treacherous, he wanted to capture Lin Feng now. Yang Shao, there are no tensions between you and me, and you even invited me to join the Gone Ministry. Is that how you treat your friends? Replied Lin Feng icily, staring at Yang Shao. He opened his hand and deployment marks appeared. Your Excellency, I think you won't accept my invitation, so I'll capture you first and then we can talk. Yang Shao smiled. Lin Feng suddenly turned into a beam of light and shot off into the distance. Die, shouted Great Emperor Zi icily. He released Fire Dao power, which struck Lin Feng and penetrated into his body. Lin Feng was furious when he sensed the qi latch hold of him. If you want to go into the grave, capture him, shouted Yang Shao explosively as he started chasing Lin Feng. The crowd frowned. Their silhouettes flickered. They all chased after Lin Feng like madmen. Since Yang Shao had told them to, they obeyed. He might even keep his promise. Lin Feng released empty space and wind cosmic energies and modified them. At the same time, his spirit world chi filled the air and gigantic wings appeared on his back. He beat them and streaked across the sky. He was moving at an incredible speed. How fast? Yang Xiao remains vigilant. He joined hands with me, but surprisingly he asked some great emperors to help him. He hadn't thought this guy would be so fast, thought Great Emperor Z when he saw that. However, deployment marks appeared under his feet and he started moving through empty spaces. Chapter 21-26, Killing God. Yang Xiao was extremely fast. Deployment lights appeared under his feet and he started moving. He caught up with Great Emperor Z and they continued chasing Lin Feng. When Great Emperor Z heard the whistling sounds next to him, he fumed. People from the Gone Ministry are good to Yang Xiao. They know he always resorts to evil methods, so they gave him a precious treasure to escape. Yang Xiao was one of the 2 emperors who had the highest social status in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. His social status was higher than Yi Kei's or Xie Mao's. Of course, he was stronger than them, too. He had an extensive knowledge and profound scholarship. He wasn't greedy, quite even-tempered, and he also remained discreet most of the time. He obtained things all the time from all the ministries because he was talented. He could steal people's memories and use them for himself. When he took someone's memories, the victim became amnesic and stupid. In the past, there had been many cases in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Some extremely strong people had lost memories. Yang Xiao didn't care about weak people's memories. At the beginning, nobody knew who had done it. Eventually people had found out that it was Yang Xiao, but the Gone Ministry protected him. They had given him a treasure which protected his life, so nobody could do anything to him. However, similar things continued happening and the Supreme Ministries were infuriated and wanted to punish him. They even threatened to kill him if he touched their disciples' memories. Yang Xiao had finally stopped hunting the disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. When Yang Xiao saw Lin Feng, he had immediately thought of him as a prey. He wanted to steal Lin Feng's memories. It was a terrifying skill, especially since Lin Feng was extremely strong. Stealing such people's memories had made Yang Xiao extremely strong. Because of his special power, it was difficult for people of the same cultivation level to resist him, even though he wasn't very talented. Only one person who had an innate spiritual deployment-type body could compete with him. That person's power was similar to the legendary cultivator's power who had created the deployment mines with deployment spiritual beings. It was an innate power. It was difficult to find such people in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, and his deployment spells were awesome. That person was the first emperor of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. Many great emperors were weaker than him. Lin Feng's speed was terrifying. However, Yang Xiao was catching up with him. Red lights shot towards Lin Feng. He frowned and turned around suddenly. World of the living imprints flashed towards Yang Xiao. It was like heaven and earth were surrounding him. Yang Xiao had nowhere to escape. Yang Xiao released deployment lights around himself, and disappeared. He reappeared above Lin Feng. Lin Feng's eyes became pitch black and deathly cold. His death intent was intense. Holy spirits filled with cursing strength moved towards Yang Xiao, pulsing with power. At the same time, Lin Feng shouted furiously, sound waves and cursing strength invaded Yang Xiao's mind. At the same time, Lin Feng raised his hands and blocked the red lights. Lin Feng released explosive deployment marks, and appeared in front of Yang Xiao. Terrifying cosmic energies emitted furious whistling sounds and oppressed Yang Xiao. Sword lights streaked across the sky and a dazzling sword trail appeared, able to cut and destroy anything. Block! Yang Xiao suddenly turned into a void, a strong wind started blowing and energies rolled out around him. He disappeared and reappeared in front of Lin Feng again. Terrifying lights emerged from his third eye and shot towards Lin Feng's brain, accompanied by a dangerous qi. Lin Feng felt his thoughts start to unsettle. He suddenly had a headache and the impression his brain was going to explode. His soul also started to shake chaotically. Die. Death Strength moved towards his enemy's brain, both of them had terrifying attacks, and both controlled deployment spells. Their attacks were cruel and brutal. Anyone else could have been easily killed by their attacks. A terrifying strength moved towards Lin Feng. He raised his hands to block, and Yang Xiao had the impression a mountain had fallen onto his back. He could barely breathe, and felt he was going to explode. Deployment lights emerged from his body and he retreated. He was thinking that he was right, Lin Feng was indeed extremely talented, a real genius. In the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, there weren't many people like him, he might be as strong as the one who had a spiritual deployment body. Yang Xiao wanted to steal his memories even more. Great Emperor Z and the others finally caught up with them. Great Emperor Z stretched his hands and a terrifying fire surrounded Lin Feng. It felt like his entire body was going to burn. Stop! Behind him, deployment lights started intertwining. A cage appeared and imprisoned him. Everybody smiled coldly. He wanted to escape from them, but it wasn't that easy. However, they saw Lin Feng jump up, he raised his shining fist, smashed the cage, and blew it apart instantly. Then he took out a deployment talisman and he disappeared, reappearing far in the distance. What kind of materials did he use to carve such a deployment talisman? He can surprisingly teleport so far. Yang Xiao and the others were astonished and all pulled long faces. Surprisingly, he had escaped. Chase him, shouted Yang Xiao icily. He was extremely fast. Deployment lights surrounded him again, he disappeared once more. Lin Feng's speed was terrifying. He used deployment talismans, knowing he wasn't strong enough to deal with so many great emperors. Yang Xiao had asked them to chase him, not the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, but the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry couldn't say anything to protect him. Lin Feng had come to the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry willing to take risks. Now it was even worse, he was in the Gone Ministry's paradise. He had anticipated he would run into danger, he just hadn't thought it would happen so fast. Lin Feng realized that he couldn't escape from Yang Xiao. Yang Xiao shouted extremely loudly, "Help me stop that guy, I'll be infinitely grateful." Many people heard him clearly far away in the distance and rushed over. Lin Feng saw someone rush over to him. He welcomed the man with a sword attack. The sword lights were dazzling and hurt that guy's eyes as it turned into a gigantic beam of light. Lin Feng then used another deployment talisman and disappeared. However, some people were still blocking him. A strong cultivator released ancient imprints onwards him. At the same time, Tao power moved into his body. He grunted with pain, infuriated. "Anyone who tries to stop me will die," shouted Lin Feng explosively, the earth and sky trembling. 9 dragons roared. At the same time, a violent chi exploded out from him. It was a weapon king chi, terrifying and indestructible. Lin Feng seemed to be able to conquer every obstacle. He flapped his gigantic deployment wings unceasingly and streaked across the sky. Someone was staring at him as he tried to block Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked back at him icily. He used his Nihility Sword Scripture's attack and released an empty space death sword, simultaneously releasing other sword energies. His enemy didn't have time to be stupefied, he instantly disappeared, dead and gone. Ordinary emperors of the top of the Huang Qi layer couldn't withstand a single attack from him. Lin Feng didn't stop moving. Someone in front of him released ice-cold lights. His death strength turned into a long river. At the same time, millions of black death swords appeared. His world of the living imprints blotted out the sky. Lin Feng's enemy had the impression he was going to drown. He tried to escape from Lin Feng, but those death energies absorbed him completely. When the crowd in the distance saw that, they were astonished. In the blink of an eye, Lin Feng had already killed 5 or 6 people, everyone who had tried to stop him. How insolent, swore a great emperor, darting forwards and releasing his qi. He threw himself at Lin Feng, condensing endless strength. The terrifying qi blotted out the sky. In Lin Feng's eyes there was only coldness and death. People chased him to kill him. Then he had to kill them. If his soul and physical body hadn't been strong enough, he would have been dead long ago. Die. Lin Feng looked like a death god. Nothing could distract him. He threw himself at the qi which the great emperor was condensing and released qi himself. He looked like a sharp sword. Stay here, shouted the great emperor, stepping forwards. The ground was shaking. A strong wind was blowing, strong enough to kill people. However, when he released that explosive qi, Lin Feng disappeared and released his shadow spirit. His whole body turned into a blurry shadow and he moved even faster. The wind was still moaning, something moved through it with a whistle of doom. The terrifying qi made the earth and sky tremble. The great emperor stopped running forwards, his face stiffening. Yang Shao streaked across the sky, a hurricane appearing around him. He frowned because he saw the great emperor turn into blood and ashes suddenly. Yang Zhao's heart started pounding, but he wanted Lin Feng's memories even more. The more dangerous Lin Feng was, the more interesting he was. He wanted to obtain Lin Feng's powers. Chapter 21-27, Cauldron modifying a human being in the sky. Yang Shao and Lin Feng kept streaking across the sky. Huge waves of energies surged around them. Lin Feng kept flapping his wings, his qi terrifying. Yang Shao had treasures which made him even faster. He was faster than Lin Feng and chased him closely. Even though Yang Shao was really close, he preferred being vigilant, as he could sense that Lin Feng was dangerous. Lin Feng had just destroyed a great emperor. Besides, if he didn't have a special treasure and some special abilities, Lin Feng could have killed him already. Of course, he wasn't ready to give up. He was determined to obtain Lin Feng's memories. Therefore, as he chased Lin Feng, on the way, he kept shouting and asking people to help him capture and kill Lin Feng. People kept getting killed by Lin Feng. Yang Shao didn't care about sacrificing them to slow Lin Feng down. Lin Feng was furious. He wanted to capture Yang Shao and turn him into a demon puppet. But many people were staring at him. If he captured Yang Shao, he would probably never be able to leave the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry alive. At that moment, sharp lights glittered in Lin Feng's eyes. In front of him, there was a deployment mine with a tombstone. Around it, as before, there were deployment beasts protecting it. The guardian spirits were a legendary beast like Swan and Eye. There was also a mythical beast which had the head of a dragon, a lion's body, hoofs, wings and a tail, and some other terrifying beasts. They looked ferocious and didn't seem ready to let anyone in. When Lin Feng saw that, he suddenly turned around and looked at Yang Shao who was closely chasing him. Yang Shao was moving very quickly, but when he saw Lin Feng stop, he was surprised, so he also stopped. He didn't start a great battle against Lin Feng. Since Lin Feng had stopped, it was better to wait for the great emperors behind to arrive. Yang Shao didn't want Lin Feng to escape, he wanted to steal his memories. He was willing to chase Lin Feng all over the small world to capture him. A strong wind started blowing. Great imperial strength invaded the atmosphere. The great emperors arrived. When they saw Lin Feng was getting near the guardian spirits, they frowned. What was this guy going to do? Divide. Lin Feng turned into 2, then 3, and very quickly, there were Lin Feng's clones everywhere. Yang Shao and the others were astonished. They could easily see his real body still, it had wings and a powerful qi. And then he disappeared. The clones dispersed. Nobody could see Lin Feng's real body anymore. All the clones suddenly turned around and fled. Deadly deployment lights shot everywhere. "Where are you going?" shouted Yang Shao icily. The crowd also chased him, but then the clones hurtled towards the deployment beasts. Lin Feng said icily, "Kill those deployment beasts and open the grave." "This guy is insane," thought the crowd when they heard Lin Feng. They all pulled long faces. The deployment beasts roared their fury and countless illusions shot towards Lin Feng. However, his countless clones just kept advancing. The sky exploded as illusions and clones died together. The ancient gravestone cracked and exploded. A hole appeared in the tomb, and someone ran towards it and jumped inside. That's his real body. He used a deployment talisman. Everybody was astonished. Mu Feng's real body had entered the grave. "Yang Xiao, you said you could fight against those deployment beasts, do it now," a great emperor pressed him. Someone had gone into the grave, and they all wanted to follow. "Keep calm. We need to cooperate. We need more great emperors," said Yang Xiao slowly, regaining his calm. Lin Feng was inside the grave. He realized that it didn't look like a grave, there were deployment mines on both sides. Those deployment mines were filled with all kinds of strange things. Many deployment stones had human shapes, who looked like they were sleeping. "Are those real or statues?" wondered Lin Feng. He continued walking forwards. He didn't touch those gigantic stones. Whose tomb could it be, mused Lin Feng. He realized that apart from those deployment stones, there were also beasts here. The path was extremely long, and then Lin Feng heard the sound of a cauldron being struck, which made him shiver. The sound wave made his soul shake. Was danger coming? What's happening? Lin Feng shuddered and gazed into the distance. However, he couldn't see very far, it was supernaturally dark. The death cauldron sounds kept penetrating into his body. It felt like something was trying to kill him. Lin Feng continued walking forwards. Since he was in the grave, he wanted to see what there was inside. A mysterious qi filled the air. After a short time, a silhouette appeared in front of Lin Feng. It was a strong cultivator from the Yuan clan. Lin Feng had turned him into a demon puppet. He wasn't very talented, so he was useless to Lin Feng. "Go and have a look," Lin Feng said to the demon puppet. The demon puppet obeyed. Even if a demon puppet could die, they would obey. Lin Feng could clearly sense that the demon puppet was in danger. Even as the demon puppet relayed to Lin Feng what he saw, he collapsed and died. Cauldron, an ancient death cauldron. Lin Feng frowned, his face stiff. There was a cauldron blocking his field of vision and the path. The sound waves emitted by the cauldron could kill people. It was extremely deadly, a level 3 or more great imperial weapon. "Death, I know Death Dao, can that cauldron even kill me?" thought Lin Feng, walking forwards resolutely. Even if the demon puppet had died, Lin Feng wanted to see what had killed him. As Lin Feng walked forwards, the mysterious sound waves kept making his soul shiver. It was truly a deadly cauldron. Lin Feng transformed cosmic energies into life strength and protected himself. The sound waves continued making him shake, but they couldn't kill him. Very quickly, something strange happened. Lin Feng's death and life strengths revolved within him. Lin Feng arrived in front of the cauldron, noticing it was very old. It was a deadly cauldron, giving the impression nobody could control it. If Lin Feng hadn't understood life and death Dao, he wouldn't have gone there. Even great emperors didn't dare do so. Lin Feng released his godly awareness and death strength towards the cauldron. He wanted to see what it truly was. However, when his godly awareness and death strength surrounded the cauldron, a terrifying beam of light emerged from the cauldron. It contained death lights which surrounded Lin Feng. His face turned deathly pale and his faces stiffened. Then, his death strength was drained out of his body as the cauldron stole it away. No. Lin Feng interrupted his connection to the cauldron. However, its strength became even more terrifying, and even his godly awareness was sucked in by the cauldron. "No," shouted Lin Feng furiously. His soul couldn't control his body anymore, it was forced out as well. The strength was terrifying. He had fearsome fighting abilities, so he rarely left his body with his soul. However, at that moment, his soul was out of his body, irresistibly drawn forth. Lin Feng could see his own physical body with his soul, his body looked stiff. The cauldron absorbed his soul. The cauldron started trembling, Lin Feng's soul trembled and rotated inside the cauldron, as if the cauldron was trying to refine Lin Feng's soul and turn into a cauldron soul. The cauldron began to rumble. It wanted to use Lin Feng's life and break the tomb open. Lin Feng's soul, inside the ancient cauldron, was dazzling to behold. Lin Feng was astonished. He had thought that only people could create great imperial weapons, he had never thought great imperial weapons could create people. Yang Xiao and the others had managed to enter the tomb and now sensed dangerous forces. They had hurried along because they didn't sense the cauldron's deadly energies. They hoped to overtake Lin Feng on the way. When they saw Lin Feng's body, they were all astonished. Why did it have no qi at all? Is that a clone? Yang Xiao slapped the body. There was a crack of impact, Lin Feng's body collapsed, but remained intact. It did not disappear. That's his body, it's not a clone. His physical body is incredibly strong, is he dead? Their faces stiffened as they thought their work had been for nothing. Chapter 21-28, Innate Great Deployment Master, Let Me Try. Yang Xiao was stupefied. He walked over to Lin Feng, opened his third eye and inspected Lin Feng's body. After a few seconds, he looked astonished. His soul has been destroyed. He's dead. What? The others' faces stiffened. His soul had been destroyed. Mu Feng was really dead. When they thought about that, they gazed into the distance. The cauldron had already disappeared. They could see a cave in the distance though, an awesome qi filled the air there, silencing all of them. A silhouette moved like the wind, a great emperor. However, when they saw it, everyone looked astonished. A gigantic beast appeared in front of them. It wasn't a deployment beast, it was a real beast, a Maharaja. He had the head of a dragon and the body of a snake, dozens of meters long. His eyes were overbearing. How is this possible? How can there be such a terrifying beast in here? The crowd was astonished. The gigantic Maharaja curled up in the gigantic deployment mine, he looked like the guardian of the mine. If there's a gigantic beast, there's a treasure and that beast is protecting it, someone exclaimed. What treasure was the beast protecting, though? Many more people had arrived. After entering, when they saw the Maharaja, they were stunned and their hearts started pounding. What a terrifying beast! They would have never thought there would be such a terrifying beast in here. Why did legend say the descendants of the great deployment master were buried here? Master Maharaja, where are we? Asked someone. However, the Maharaja just stared at him and didn't reply. The great emperor's faces stiffened. The Maharaja remained silent as he slowly started moving. The whole crowd withdrew, trying to hide their fear. The Maharaja moved away and deployment stones appeared in people's fields of vision. There were many jade-like deployment stones, and they all seemed alive. Innate spiritual deployment. The strong cultivators of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry were astonished, their eyes glittering. Those deployment stones looked alive. The Maharaja remained motionless, staring at the deployment stones, he looked excited. Kacha. People's hearts were pounding. Cracks appeared in the deployment stones. After that, more crackling sounds spread in the air. There were more and more fissures in the stones. People's hearts were pounding furiously. Innate spiritual deployment, innate great deployment master, how strong was such a cultivator compared to a saint? When they thought about that, they were even more excited than capturing Lin Feng. Dazzling lights appeared. They had almost forgotten that there was a deadly Maharaja in front of them, even though the beast could devour them in one bite. All they thought about at that moment was the innate spiritual deployment, the innate great deployment master, who might be stronger than a saint. More fissures appeared and finally, the deployment mine exploded all around them. A spiritual body appeared. It had a human shape, but its features were not distinct. The Maharaja stuck out his tongue. He looked excited as he crawled towards the spiritual deployment body. At that moment, a few great emperors appeared and also shot towards the innate spiritual deployment body. The Maharaja was infuriated. He flicked his tongue and a strong wind started blowing. He immediately swallowed one of the great emperors. The man didn't even have time to shriek. Yang Shao and Great Emperor Zi were behind the others, both looking scared. That Maharaja was a Saint Imperial Maharaja. He was probably extremely old. However, he had always stayed there to protect the area and wait for the innate great deployment master to be born. The Maharaja had devoured a strong cultivator, but he couldn't block all the great emperors from reaching the spiritual body. At that moment, someone stretched his hands out and grabbed the deployment spiritual body. Deployment lights appeared around him and started intertwining. They turned into a terrifying strength and attracted the strength of the 10,000 things of creation. However, a few seconds later, the great emperor was destroyed. People's hearts twitched. That Maharaja was even stronger than they had expected. Innate great deployment master, that innate spiritual body is surprisingly so terrifying. Those who were still alive were terrified. They now believed half of the legends of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry about their ancestors. The innate great deployment master was terrifying. His deployment spells could easily kill great emperors. However, the great emperor had been careless. The innate spiritual body looked at the crowd, and those people stepped back. They didn't dare get close, as they didn't want to die. The Maharaja didn't need to get involved, the innate spiritual body could also kill them. The spiritual body moved towards the Maharaja. The Maharaja lowered his head and the spiritual body jumped onto it. The Maharaja stuck out his tongue again happily. Then, he rose up into the air. Rumbling started all around them, the tomb was collapsing. Let's go. Great Emperor Zi and Yang Shao retreated. When they passed next to Lin Feng's body, Yang Shao grabbed it and rose up into the air with it. Luckily, the Maharaja hadn't tried to kill them, or they would have died. The Maharaja destroyed the tomb as it exited. It was 1,000 meters long, and looked as big as a mountain. The crowd was astonished and scared when they saw him. What's that? Some people were overcome with fear. They had the impression their legs were too weak to carry their bodies. A Maharaja. It has a dragon head and a snake body. It's a gigantic one, which means he must be a saint emperor. It's also quite dark. He must be extremely strong as saint emperor. That's why he's so big. Explained someone who knew about Maharajas. People's hearts were pounding. Everybody retreated instinctively from it. There's someone on the Maharaja's head. It's not a person, it's a human form. What the hell is going on here? Yang Shao, Great Emperor Zi, you went into the tomb, what happened there? Someone asked Yang Shao and Great Emperor Zi when they came out of the hole. Innate spiritual deployment, innate great deployment master, let's go, let's inform the teachers, shouted Yang Shao extremely loudly. Everybody shuddered with fear. An innate spiritual deployment. Were the legends true? And he was protected by a terrifying Maharaja? Such creatures were incredibly dangerous in this world. The innate spiritual body was seated on the Maharaja's head. They pierced through the clouds together and flew extremely high. He looked like a king. They moved forwards, and the emperors and great emperors all moved backwards. However, the deployment beasts looked excited as they roared. They gathered around, even the guardian spirits greeting their new king. It was indeed astonishing. Did those deployment beasts just protect their king? Is that a king? So what about the other tombs? Were they just covers, wondered the crowd. However, it wasn't important anymore. They now wanted to know whether the elders of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry could deal with the Maharaga and the innate spiritual body, and use them for the sake of the ministry. But the Maharaga didn't attack anyone in the small world yet. The Maharaga and the deployment beasts were just worried about their king. All of that had nothing to do with Lin Feng. At that moment, the death cauldron was floating in the sky. Many strong cultivators were staring at it. There were many corpses around the cauldron, because it had killed them. But to Lin Feng, the most terrifying thing was that the ancient cauldron seemed to have a spirit, and it seemed to want to modify Lin Feng's soul to make it turn into his own. The cauldron could kill great emperors, but it seemed complicated for it to modify Lin Feng's soul. Chapter 21-29, Modifying the Cauldron. Lin Feng's soul was still in the cauldron. He could see everything happening outside. He could also sense that the cauldron wanted to modify his soul. The cauldron kept rotating and emitting deadly sounds. People in the distance kept retreating, they didn't dare get close. The cauldron is a terrifying great imperial weapon, it's a precious treasure. Why was it just outside of the grave, and what was in the grave, wondered Lin Feng. He still felt safe inside. He even thought about other things. Actually, Lin Feng was really safe in there, because the ancient cauldron was extremely powerful and could easily kill emperors at the top of the Huang Qi layer and even great emperors. If the cauldron had been able to modify his soul, it would have done so already. The ancient cauldron sensed it couldn't modify Lin Feng's soul, so it was frustrated at the lack of progress. In Lin Feng's soul, a world pattern appeared, his spirit world. A cultivator's soul and spirit were one, the soul was the container. When Lin Feng's soul was absorbed by the ancient cauldron, his spirit was also absorbed. Master, said Lin Feng to Qin Shan. That ancient cauldron can't modify your soul now, but you should let it, a calm voice responded to Lin Feng. Lin Feng frowned. He knew that the saint could barely talk, it was very difficult and tiring for him, usually they communicated using their souls. All right, replied Lin Feng. He knew that the saint couldn't reply. He stopped resisting the cauldron and let it modify him. Lin Feng realized that the cauldron really could modify his soul. His soul and the cauldron were slowly becoming one. No, is my soul going to become the cauldron's soul? If that's the case, will I ever manage to come out? Thought Lin Feng. However, he had no choice. His soul was in the cauldron, it had been absorbed, he couldn't escape. He had to let the cauldron modify his soul, but he didn't know what was going to happen. Time passed. In the distance, the crowd noticed that the cauldron wasn't acting as dangerously anymore, it seemed to be calming down. Lin Feng sensed his soul was being modified by the cauldron, he was turning into the cauldron's soul. He was becoming part of the ancient cauldron. After some time, the ancient cauldron settled down. Lin Feng's soul had become a part of the cauldron. Lin Feng tried to move and realized the cauldron moved when Lin Feng wanted to. If Lin Feng's physical body had been able to react, he would have cold sweats. He wasn't a human being anymore, he was a cauldron. He had become a cauldron. Was he going to be a cauldron forever? Lin Feng shivered. In the distance, the crowd was astonished, the cauldron staggered and kept shaking. What kind of cauldron was that? What was happening? But quickly, he stopped shaking and moved forwards. Lin Feng looked for the place where his physical body was, he had to find his body. He didn't want to live as a cauldron his entire life. However, when Lin Feng went back to the grave where the cauldron had absorbed his soul, he saw the grave had collapsed. The cauldron entered the hole and there was nothing left inside, his physical body had disappeared. Lin Feng had lost his physical body. He was astonished. Had someone taken it? What happened here, thought Lin Feng. However, he couldn't talk. He was a cauldron, he wasn't a human being anymore. Yang Xiao was outside and wanted to capture me. The grave collapsed, which means that if Yang Xiao hasn't died, he must be the one who has taken my physical body, thought Lin Feng, and then he rose up into the air again. In the distance, the people were amazed. Even though the cauldron wasn't releasing death sound waves anymore, they were still wondering why it was acting so strange. It had gone back into the ruins, was it looking for something? Now it had left again. It didn't look like something a cauldron could do, it was more something a human being would do. The cauldron was acting like it was alive. Lin Feng continued flying forwards. However, he realized that people were watching him. In the paradise, there were still many people, and when they saw a cauldron traveling on its own, how could they not be interested? Especially those who hadn't seen how terrifying his death sound waves were. At that moment, a great emperor rushed over to the cauldron. Lin Feng grunted icily in his consciousness. The cauldron released sound waves in waves, the man turned black and his face stiffened. This ancient cauldron was dangerous. The death sound waves kept resonating, filling the air. Lin Feng was very annoyed, as he realized that now that he controlled the cauldron, it wasn't as powerful as before, otherwise, the man would have died already. Lin Feng didn't know that that ancient cauldron initially had its own body. It had been a terrifying cultivator who had sacrificed himself to make this terrifying great imperial weapon. After so many years, it still had a thread of consciousness left, which was why it had been so powerful. Now that Lin Feng's soul had become the cauldron's soul, it couldn't be as strong as before. The stronger the soul, the stronger the cauldron. Of course, even though that cauldron wasn't as strong as before, it could still kill great emperors. Very quickly, the people who tried to steal the cauldron all died. They became Lin Feng's first victims as a cauldron. Of course, as Lin Feng looked for his physical body, he bumped into many people who wanted to steal him. Lin Feng started killing them methodically. When people got close to him, he slaughtered them in a flash. That way, the people who chased him kept their distance after seeing that. That cauldron is alive and cunning, they hissed in fear. Back in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, the members of the 81 ministries were astonished, including some people of the Supreme Ministries. The news of the innate spiritual body and the Maharaja had reached them. A group of strong cultivators surrounded the Maharaja and the innate spiritual body and the group of deployment beasts. It was spectacular to see them in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. "Your Excellency, who are you?" demanded a strong cultivator of the Maharaja. "My king needs a physical body," replied the Maharaja uncaringly. Everybody knew that his king was the innate spiritual body, only the spiritual body could be his king. However, people didn't understand why that terrifyingly strong Maharaja was calling that spiritual body his king. That guy did it on purpose, he wants to choose a physical body. Thought the crowd. The spiritual body wants to use body capture. I don't like that word. Let's say my king is the future king of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, he will also be a great deployment master of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. You should be happy about having a king, said the Maharaja icily. The crowd frowned. That strong cultivator retorted, "What you mean is that after using the body capture, the spiritual body will join the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry and become our disciple." "He won't be your disciple, he will be the king of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry," said the Maharaja, staring at that strong cultivator icily. The strong cultivators of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry looked pensive. An innate great deployment master. It was rare. If that guy could really become a great deployment master and became their king, why not? The Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry would rise at the speed of light. However, they were worried that he would also make them submit, they didn't want to lose control or become his slaves. The strong cultivators talked to one another, and after a short time, the same strong cultivator asked, "What body do you want?" At that moment, the Maharaja suddenly looked determined, as if he had been getting ready for the question. Many strong cultivators released chi when they saw that, but they heard the Maharaja shout furiously, "Who wants to stop me? Do you want my king to join another group?" Many people were astonished. The Maharaja grabbed someone, that person shouted, "Teacher, save me." Oh no. He surprisingly chose him, how sad. Yang Xiao, who was in the crowd, frowned. Surprisingly, they had chosen him, that guy was as famous as he was. It was the cultivator who had the spiritual deployment body, his deployment spells were terrifying and he was extremely talented, you can't choose him. Change the body please. Humph. Why would my king want someone who has no talent and who isn't extremely strong? It would be useless. He's lucky to have been chosen, said the Maharaja, refusing to release the person. The spiritual body immediately penetrated into the hapless man, the crowd was astonished. They were all terrified and didn't want to stay near him anymore. Chapter 21:30, Another saint-like cultivator. After that, the spiritual body finally had a real body, with ears, feet, hands. However, he looked evil and terrifying. He looked extremely clever, too. He glanced at the crowd and smiled icily, I've transmitted everything to him. He's me now and I'm him. Of course, the difference is that I am now your king. Remember that. He looked dignified and majestic like a king. He was still on the Maharaja's head and looked at the crowd in a disdainfully. Then he slowly turned around and looked at Yang Xiao. Where's the cauldron? Yang Xiao didn't understand, the cauldron. When Yang Xiao had entered the tomb, the cauldron and Lin Feng had already disappeared. He had just found Lin Feng's body. My king, he doesn't have the cauldron. The cauldron absorbed a soul and left. I don't know where he is, said the Maharaja icily. The spiritual body frowned. The Maharaja looked at Yang Xiao and said, show me that person's body. Yang Xiao was astonished, his face twitched. Initially, that person had the same position as him in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, and now he had turned into their king. A great deployment master had stolen his body. He was also annoyingly proud and arrogant. But Yang Xiao had no choice, but to obey. He took out Lin Feng's body. The spiritual body looked at Lin Feng's body calmly. The Maharaja surrounded Lin Feng and said to the spiritual body, my king, that's the one, his soul was absorbed by the cauldron. That's his physical body. Alright, nodded the spiritual body nodding. Then, a strong wind moved to the body to destroy it. However, Lin Feng's body seemed unaffected, the power just rang off it. The spiritual body was stupefied and frowned, what an incredibly strong physical body. What a pity, I could have used it. But I guess an innate spiritual deployment body is not bad either. At that moment, the cauldron emitted whistling sounds in the far distance. The spiritual body was stupefied and looked at the cauldron. His eyes twinkled, he smiled and thought, what a guy, you've been following me for so many years, you can always find me. Lin Feng didn't know what the spiritual body was thinking. At that moment, he was staring at his own body, but he was annoyed, as there were so many strong cultivators around once again. He could only float in the air since he was a cauldron. 10,000 evolutions cauldron, come back, shouted the spiritual body. Lin Feng was startled. That person was talking to the cauldron, was he the owner of the cauldron before? Lin Feng slowly flew over next to the spiritual body. The spiritual body smiled, turned around and said to the crowd, even though I am an innate spiritual deployment body, I've already transmitted my knowledge to this body and I'm your king. Don't worry, I will make the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry rise and become really strong. Innate? Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry's king. Thought Lin Feng. He tried to understand what was going on. Alright, everybody can disperse, I will choose a palace, said the spiritual body. The Maharaja left and the crowd dispersed. Only a few strong cultivators from the Supreme Ministries followed him. The worst thing is that the spiritual body chose a king's palace from the Gone Ministry. Had he absorbed the body's memories as well? Lin Feng followed the spiritual body as well. Even though his body was still there, he couldn't take it away easily. The Maharaja was too strong. Once at the palace, the spiritual body glanced around and bellowed. Deployment lights started intertwining. He had cast a deployment spell on the whole palace. He slowly turned around and looked at the deployment beasts. This is my palace now, so protect it. The deployment beasts obeyed and surrounded the palace. Only the Maharaja stayed, taking Lin Feng's body and throwing it on the ground. Lin Feng was very annoyed. Good boy, we haven't seen each other for tens of thousands of years, and you've always been protecting me, thank you, said the spiritual body, tapping the Maharaja's head and smiling patiently. The Maharaja stuck out his tongue and looked happy, he said, sounding like a human being, Master, that's my duty. I've been waiting for so long and now my king has come back. When Lin Feng heard them, he was stupefied. That innate great deployment master had really been born in the depths of the earth and sky. He heard some little secrets. Yes, back then, I couldn't break free and I fell. Now that I have come back to life through a deployment spell, I will break free from the limits of the past and I will become much stronger, said the spiritual body, his eyes twinkling. He looked like a king. Tens of thousands of years before, he had also been a king. A great deployment master. Lin Feng was stunned. Another monstrously strong cultivator. Saint Tianhun was a saint, but he had been badly injured. The person in front of him at that moment had been reborn through a deployment spell and now had innate deployment body. That was really ominous. He had cast a terrifying deployment spell in front of Lin Feng in the blink of an eye, covering the whole palace. At that moment, the spiritual body looked at the ancient cauldron and smiled. So many years have passed, the 10,000 evolutions cauldron has always been my favorite weapon. Now you look less dazzling than in the past. He stretched out his hands and touched the cauldron, deployment marks started intertwining. The 10,000 evolutions cauldron started shining, a formidable chi rising from it. Lin Feng's soul trembled. That chi was indeed impressive. The atmosphere became oppressive. Great deployment masters use great imperial weapons. Lin Feng didn't understand. His current body seemed to be a terrifying weapon, but Lin Feng didn't even know how to use it, perhaps because he had let the cauldron modify his soul. Lin Feng felt powerless now. He didn't even understand what the cauldron was. He wanted his physical body back. However, when he heard the spiritual body, he understood this duo was tens of thousands of years old. Dragon Maharaja, do you have any great imperial weapons? The spiritual body asked the Maharaja. The Maharaja nodded and spat out a few. They were all great imperial weapons, but the Maharaja didn't seem to treat them like treasures, he simply spat them out. The spiritual body put those weapons in the cauldron and smiled, so many years, you don't even have a thread of my consciousness anymore. What a tragedy. Since you forgot your own powers, I'll help you. The spiritual body, who still had his hand on the cauldron, started carved deployment marks on the cauldron in glittering strokes. Lin Feng was trembling, and his soul was twitching. Surprisingly, the spiritual body was transforming the great imperial weapons. Lin Feng could barely stand it, the cauldron kept trembling. The spiritual body frowned and said, I need to modify you again. You're so weak now. You don't look like an imposing and awe-inspiring king's cauldron anymore. The lights shone again. Lin Feng was terrified, his soul strength was running out. The process didn't last too long, however. The great imperial weapons finally transformed and fused together with the cauldron. Lin Feng was speechless. The cauldron was now a terrifying great imperial weapon. It was probably a level 8 or 9 great imperial weapon. Lin Feng had to study his current body and see how strong it was. He knew about the death sound waves and the soul-absorbing power. The spiritual body tapped the cauldron and smiled, wait and I'll make you shine again. I need to stabilize a little in this new physical body, then I'll bring you back to life. Then, we'll fuse together and try to become the first cultivator of the continent of the 9 clouds. The spiritual body burst into laughter and left the palace. However, the Maharaja didn't leave. It was on the ground and Lin Feng's physical body was left on the ground, too. Lin Feng was furious. If the Maharaja didn't leave, Lin Feng couldn't do anything at all. Lin Feng didn't know whether he could leave that cauldron or not, even if he used his full strength. How could he get back into his real body? Besides, the spiritual body had said he was going to modify him and make him come back to life. What was that supposed to mean? Lin Feng had to leave as soon as possible, before he came back. Chapter 2131, Evasion. Lin Feng landed on the ground calmly. The Maharaja was still there, not intending to leave. Lin Feng was angry, but he didn't hurry. He started studying the 10,000 evolutions cauldron. He had turned into a cauldron, but he wasn't familiar with it. He realized that there were millions of ancient, complex marks in the 10,000 evolutions cauldron. He could only sigh when he saw how complex this cauldron was. He also realized that a few terrifying great deployment marks were interconnected. The deployment marks the spiritual body had carved a moment before were probably evolving deployment marks. This terrifying cauldron could even modify great imperial weapons. Lin Feng was scared because he needed to use lots of soul strength. He understood he had replaced the consciousness of the cauldron, so he needed to help it and use his own strength when deploying energies. If he tried to make such a cauldron, it would be impossible. This cauldron could even absorb his soul freely. With his strength, he couldn't possibly modify the cauldron. Apart from evolution strength, there's also death strength in this cauldron, and it must also have some soul-absorbing evolution strength, thought Lin Feng. He had sensed the death strength when he found the cauldron. It was much more powerful than his own. He already knew how to release death sound waves with the cauldron, but now he needed to learn how to use the other types of strength the cauldron possessed. Lin Feng slowly started studying the complex deployment spells. The Maharaja's eyes were closed, but sometimes he opened them and glanced at the ancient cauldron neutrally. He said, "So many years have passed, and now you seem to look new." Lin Feng rose up into the air and rotating around the Maharaja to show off his strength. He had seen that the spiritual body thought highly of the cauldron. The cauldron had a high social position in their small group. This cauldron used to be the old man's treasure in the past. The air whistled as Lin Feng moved out. The Maharaja didn't pay attention. The cauldron had a soul, he would come back. The Maharaja wasn't worried about that. It had been stuck in a tomb for so many years, so it wanted to go outside. That was perfectly normal. Lin Feng moved out and traveled around the celestial remarkable deployment ministry freely and without a goal. Many people noticed him. However, the cauldron belonged to the proud and arrogant spiritual body. Nobody dared try to steal it. Even though Lin Feng sensed that many people wanted to steal the cauldron, nobody actually dared to. The spiritual body had shown them how strong he was. The celestial remarkable deployment ministry's members had been astonished. An innate great deployment master, the future king of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry. If he had been alone, the elders of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry wouldn't have treated him like that, but he also had a terrifying Maharaja with him. The members of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry really had the impression that he had the potential to become a king. Great Emperor Z is there. Lin Feng noticed Great Emperor Z. The cauldron moved towards him. Great Emperor Z frowned. He was curious about the cauldron, but he had to be vigilant. He had heard that many people had been killed by the cauldron as people were coming out of the Gone Ministry's paradise. He had to be careful. Therefore, when the cauldron drew closer and closer to him, he retreated quickly. Lin Feng was annoyed. Great Emperor Z was extremely strong and he was vigilant. The cauldron rotated at full speed and rang out. Death sound waves reached Great Emperor Z and his face suddenly turned gray. He suddenly flickered and used a deployment spell to move away at full speed. The cauldron was furious and chased Great Emperor Z at full speed. At the same time, the cauldron's lights illuminated the atmosphere and absorbed strength filled the air. Great Emperor Z was stupefied, the cauldron wanted to absorb him. What's going on? Why is that cauldron chasing me? Great Emperor Z continued flying away, but the cauldron continued chasing him too. Great Emperor Z pulled a long face. After a long time, he entered the Li Palace. The cauldron continued chasing him in there, too. Lin Feng thought that he had guessed right, he needed lots of soul strength to control the cauldron, so if he released lots of soul strength, he could kill Great Emperor Z. The members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry were astonished when they saw that. Nobody dared get close to the cauldron, everyone moving away. Lin Feng was annoyed, the members of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry were all irritating. Lin Feng turned around after some time, he didn't look for Yang Xiao, he went back to the spiritual body's palace. The Maharaja was still there and looked extremely calm and was used to remaining quiet. I need an opportunity to find my physical body and leave, thought Lin Feng. However, he didn't hurry. He just calmly stayed there for some time. It became dark outside. Lin Feng wanted to leave more than anything, but he was patient. One day passed and then on the day after, at the same time as he had left on the day before, he rose up into the air, a hum spreading out, he swooped down, grabbed his body and put it into the cauldron quickly. The Maharaja opened his eyes, looking a bit surprised. But the Maharaja didn't doubt the cauldron, saying indifferently, that physical body is really good. Our master might use it someday, don't lose it. He closed his eyes again, as if nothing had happened. Lin Feng moved away rapidly, the air whistling past him. By now, everybody knew how evil the cauldron was. When the disciples of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry saw the cauldron, they moved away as if their pants were on fire. Lin Feng headed towards the only exit from the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry as quickly as he could. Lin Feng finally arrived at the door of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry. When the guards saw the cauldron, they were shocked, but they got out of the way. The cauldron crossed the door and left the ministry behind. When Lin Feng left the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, he suddenly felt extremely much better, as if a great load had been removed from his shoulders. He shouted in relief, but no sound came out of the cauldron. However, Lin Feng knew that he wasn't safe yet. The Maharaja was extremely strong, and the stronger cultivators of the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry were dangerous, too. He had to leave this place, or they might be able to find him. When Lin Feng thought about that, he gained altitude and departed with all haste. He didn't want the people outside to notice him, he was a cauldron, after all, and if strong cultivators saw him, they might try to steal him. Way up in the sky above the clouds, Lin Feng moved along at top speed. He bumped into a few strong cultivators who wanted to steal the cauldron, but Lin Feng killed them quickly. 3 days later, back in the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry, the spiritual body stopped meditating in seclusion and came out. When he saw the Maharaja, he asked, "Little Maharaja, where's the cauldron?" The Maharaja opened his eyes, which glittered for a moment. "It left a few days ago, I don't know where it went." "Have you gone and checked?" "The first day, it left and came back quickly. It has mental abilities and is cunning. Therefore, I'm not too worried," replied the Maharaja. The spiritual body nodded, having no doubts, but he whispered, "What about the physical body?" "The cauldron took it," replied the Maharaja. "Let's go out and see," said the spiritual body calmly. They left the palace. Quickly, they learned that the cauldron had left the Celestial Remarkable Deployment Ministry a few days before. The spiritual body and the Maharaja started having doubts. Maybe the soul of that body was absorbed by the cauldron, that would explain why that body didn't have a soul, deduced the spiritual body, seated on the Maharaja's head. Yes, his soul must have been modified by the cauldron. The spiritual body frowned. According to that principle, the cauldron should have easily modified that boy's soul, especially since he was just an emperor. Now that the ancient cauldron had disappeared, he really started thinking something was wrong. As more time passed, the spiritual body found it extremely strange, and grew angry. He left the celestial remarkable deployment ministry, trying to find the cauldron. He also wanted to go to Godly Cloud City for the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. That same day, a voice coming from the sky of the celestial remarkable deployment ministry also said it was time to leave for the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. In the Gone ministry, the leader of the group dispatched some strong cultivators to go with Yang Xiao to the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. The 9 supreme ministries did the same. Other than people who wanted to participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, some were also going along just to watch. Mu Feng had turned into a passing traveler, far away from the celestial remarkable deployment ministry, in a desolate mountain range. Some bestial qi was filling the air. There was a cauldron in the clouds with a body inside. The cauldron descended, piercing through the clouds. The mountain range was more than far enough away that people from the celestial remarkable deployment ministry couldn't find him there. Chapter 2132, Coming back. The cauldron slowly descended from the sky. Lin Feng could see many beasts in the mountain range below. As a cauldron, Lin Feng had an all-around field of vision. Some of the beasts were extremely strong. When the ancient cauldron descended from the sky and landed on the mountain, many beasts looked at him coldly. In the mountains, spiritual beasts usually liked keeping their animal forms, they didn't mind having a beast form. However, they were still sentient and enlightened. When they saw the cauldron, they immediately understood that it was a precious treasure. The beasts started roaring greedily. Many beasts raced over to the cauldron, snarling and eager. However, Lin Feng merely smiled icily. He let the beasts get near and did nothing. The beasts were vigilant. When they saw that cauldron was alone and nobody around, they drew closer. When they did, deadly lights appeared around the cauldron and filled the air. The beasts couldn't control their souls anymore. The cauldron had been trying to absorb their souls. Dead beasts appeared at the top of the mountain, their souls sucked in by the ancient cauldron. The 10,000 evolutions cauldron released some evolution strength, which filled the air. The beasts' souls started shaking violently, trying to resist, but it was useless. Very quickly, their souls were destroyed and modified. What powerful evolution strength, praised Lin Feng. He was astonished. The beasts weren't too strong, but still, absorbing their souls and modifying them was something exceptional, and he realized it was different than when he modified weapons or other things. The 10,000 evolutions cauldron was a better pilot than he was and could easily modify souls. He had turned into the cauldron's soul, but he hadn't become a cauldron, he could just act as the cauldron. He didn't fuse together with the souls he absorbed them, however, he just wanted to use them to drive the cauldron. Those souls can help me drive the 10,000 evolutions cauldron. So can my soul leave it now, he wondered. He tried to bring his soul out of the cauldron. How painful. It's my soul is being flayed, he grimaced when he felt the pain. He stopped and thought, that ancient cauldron needs my soul to deploy its explosive strength. If my soul leaves the cauldron, the other souls will disperse, becoming an ancient cauldron isn't easy. The best way is to absorb many beasts' souls and turn them into the cauldron's strength. When Lin Feng realized that, he stopped moving aimlessly and brought his body away. He needed to kill some beasts. Very quickly, a gigantic tiger appeared and ran towards the cauldron, brandishing his claws. Of course, when he touched the cauldron, a fearsome strength instantly absorbed his soul, and he died. I need to modify the cauldron's strength with my own soul. Using the beast's soul to drive the cauldron requires too much strength, thought Lin Feng. His soul was the cauldron's soul, he could recover his own soul strength but not that of the beasts, but it didn't matter. His own soul strength was enough for now. Lin Feng didn't need to hunt for beasts, they came to him automatically, Lin Feng just welcomed them and absorbed their souls. If he encountered powerful and extremely strong cultivators, He didn't need Qin Shan's help anymore, he just used the cauldron to attack them. Lin Feng sensed that the ancient cauldron's souls were becoming more and more powerful, and felt more confident. He even became excited to hunt beasts. When beasts took a human form, he didn't want to hunt them, but if they had an animal form, he didn't mind, it was open season. He moved rather quickly, crossing a forest and making sure he drew nobody's attention. After all, there were some truly dangerous beasts in the continent, so he had to be careful. He emerged from the forest and arrived above a beautiful river, the sounds of splashing water filling the air. Lin Feng was amazed. The river was quite beautiful, and a silhouette appeared indistinctly on its shores. She had wet jet black hair, looked quite meek and mild, very pretty with extremely white skin, and her chi was incredible, too. She was wearing simple white clothes, and looked extremely desirable. When the beautiful woman saw the cauldron, she looked interested. That ancient cauldron looked powerful, it was probably a high-tier great imperial weapon. When the cauldron saw her, it stopped. How strange. The woman came out of the water, she had a perfect body, absolutely flawless, and her clothes were transparent. Luckily, Lin Feng was a cauldron, so he had thoughts, but his body didn't react since he was a cauldron at the moment. What a beautiful seal, he thought when he saw the necklace with a seal between her breasts. It looked extremely lifelike. The woman suddenly laughed, a robe appeared around her and she released hot chi, drying her clothes instantly. She looked at the cauldron and smiled, "You're a perverted cauldron. Do you have the same mental abilities as a human?" Lin Feng almost had cold sweats. What would the woman have thought if she had known he was a man? "You're a cauldron without a master," the woman asked Lin Feng gently. Her smile was magnificent. Lin Feng just rotated twice as if he was trying to shake his head, and the woman looked disappointed. "Interesting cauldron, you are self-aware, but unfortunately, you have a master. Otherwise, I would have taken you and we would have explored the world together." Lin Feng was speechless, mostly because he couldn't talk. However, at that moment, a hurricane started howling, bestial chi filled the air and rose to the skies. The woman frowned as she released an ice-cold chi. She didn't look so nice and gentle anymore. Lin Feng was surprised at how fast her demeanor changed. It was good that he was a cauldron. If he had been a man, he wouldn't have seen her smile, he would have just seen her furious. Powerful beasts were rushing over. The leader of the group of beasts had a human form and he was staring at the woman. He looked at her coldly and his bestial chi was impressive. "Capture her," ordered that man coldly. The beast started running at her, making the earth and sky tremble. The force of the stampede even made Lin Feng tremble. They looked fierce and powerful. However, the woman just took out a soft sword in response. She was extremely fast, invisible and intangible chi filling the air. Lin Feng just saw blood splash, and in the blink of an eye, all the beasts were dead. She put her soft sword on the leader's throat, blood dripping from it. How fast! Her attacks are so precise. She killed those beasts in one sword strike each time, praised Lin Feng. The woman put her sword away and recalled her chi. Her silhouette flickered. She landed in front of the cauldron and caressed it. Lin Feng moved back in surprise. You're shy?" asked the woman, giggling at him. Her beautiful eyes kept twinkling, she looked particularly interested in the cauldron. She continued caressing it and smiled. You have a physical body in many deployment marks. Who's your master?" "Unfortunately, I can't take you with me, it would have been fun. See you." Then, the woman turned into a beam of light and disappeared. How fast, who is she? Lin Feng was amazed. She had the same cultivation level as him, and was so strong. Lin Feng sighed, there were so many geniuses in godly clouds. Lin Feng didn't dwell on it too much. He absorbed more beasts' souls and finally stopped after reaching a certain point. The cauldron contained a great many more souls now. Lin Feng sensed that it would be much easier for his soul to leave the cauldron now. Even though it was painful, Lin Feng finally managed to leave the cauldron and move back into his body, which was still inside the cauldron. His physical body in the cauldron slowly stood up. His muscles were definitely sore after being dead for several days. He took a deep breath and enjoyed being back in his body again. He whispered, "I'm finally back." Chapter 2133, Arriving in town. Godly Clouds was the center of the continent of the 9 clouds, and had borders with the 8 other regions. It was extremely vast. It was difficult to imagine how vast it was, and impossible to know how many inhabitants lived there. Godly Cloud City was in the center of the region. It was a famous place. Many strong cultivators gathered there, especially for the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. People from the 12 districts of Godly Cloud City were there to greet them. East of Godly Cloud City and up in the sky, were groups of cultivators. Some of them were on beasts, some of them were flying in the clouds, some of them were on the ground, some of them were even walking slowly. Some of them were alone, some of them were in groups, but the people didn't stop. At the same time, from under a lake, someone raised their head and saw the numerous people all around and above them. It had started a while ago. It was like that every day, during the day, at night, at any time of the day. The number of people from the 12 cities who had arrived was incredible. The cities of Godly Clouds had therefore made a public announcement. People who weren't emperors couldn't go to the 12 cities of Godly Cloud City. At the same time, they had to take a small exam to enter the city. Godly Clouds wanted to eliminate some people. Otherwise, the city wouldn't be able to accommodate everyone. Every 100 years, it was the same thing there. Many people went there, determined to succeed. Every 100 years, many geniuses gathered in Godly Clouds. "How lively," whispered an old man at that moment, up in the sky. He was at the top of the Huangqi layer, but he felt tiny there. All the cultivators in the sky were all emperors of the top of the Huangqi layer or great emperors. They were all extremely strong. "Grandpa, so many extremely strong cultivators," exclaimed a young woman of the Huangqi layer in a weak voice. In her village, she was considered extremely strong. People said she was a genius. It had taken them a year to arrive here. She had realized that everybody was extremely strong here. "Yes, my little girl, our small village is not the only place where you can find extremely strong cultivators. In Godly Clouds, there are millions of geniuses. We have to be discreet and avoid fighting anyone," replied the old man. This kind of place was dangerous. It was better not to offend anyone. One could never know, some people could be extremely strong and kill you. "Don't worry, Grandpa. Why would I offend anyone?" whispered the young woman. "People like you came to Godly Cloud City to lose face," said someone not far from them. It was a group of 5 young men, making fun of them. The old man and the young woman turned around. They were startled. They had just said they wouldn't offend anyone and suddenly, someone tried to provoke them. She just gulped it down, though. "Little girl, let's go," said the old man to the young woman, ignoring those people. "Go. That girl is beautiful, let me help to protect her," said a smiling young man. The 4 others surrounded the old man, all of them staring at the young woman. They had overheard the old man and the young woman's conversation, so they knew that those 2 were from a small place. They had decided to capture her. Of course, this was only a small thing which happened to some people who had come to the city. Many people remained discreet and didn't want to offend anyone. Many others tried to cause trouble for no reason. There were all sorts of people, and sometimes things were unavoidable. Where there are many people, there is always chaos. Of course, many people plotted against others as well. A sword streaked across the sky and shot towards one of the young men. The air was filled with sword intent. The evil young men were stunned when they saw that. They turned around and saw a young man, like them, mounted on a beast. He slowly came towards them. His sword intent filled the air. He had just carried out that sword attack a moment before. Sword lights glittered, it was like time had stopped. The young men all disappeared into the sword lights. They were unlucky. They had bumped into a young man who didn't understand what it meant to remain discreet, but even though he killed people in a cold and detached way, he seemed to have at least a little sense of justice and righteousness. Lin Feng had the feeling his sense of justice and righteousness wasn't very developed, because he had killed so many people. The cultivation world was cruel. To become strong, it was necessary to kill people. Lin Feng was no exception. But just a moment before, for justice and righteousness, he had killed a few more people again. The old man and the young woman only saw a handsome young man. He looked enigmatic and unfathomable. He was mounted on a fire lion, which looked particularly ferocious. The fire lion looked like Cheong Chi, so Lin Feng had captured it in the mountain range. The old man was scared when he sensed the fire lion's chi. What level is that beast? Thought the old man. He looked up at Lin Feng and bowed. Thank you very much for saving us, master. In his eyes, this young man had to be a disciple from a wealthy and powerful clan. He was very strong, talented, had a powerful beast, and with only a few sword attacks he had instantly killed a few young men of the same age. They belonged to two different worlds. The young woman's eyes twinkled. She looked at Lin Feng and said, "How strong?" "It's nothing, really," Lin Feng smiled. He looked quite impressive. The old man sighed. No wonder this young man was extremely strong. He had a completely different personality from the people he had just killed. He still thought Lin Feng was an extremely strong genius from a wealthy and powerful clan. "Thanks to your slight effort, you saved my granddaughter and me," said the old man humbly. He knew that if this young man hadn't helped them, his granddaughter would have been kidnapped and he would have been killed. "I can't tolerate anything like that happening in front of me," Lin Feng assured him. "In front of us is the eastern entrance of the 12 cities, right?" "Indeed, we're almost there," said the old man nodded. "Come," Lin Feng smiled. He was in a good mood. The old man was surprised and the young woman looked excited. She jumped onto the beast and smiled cutely. "Thank you, brother." "Thank you very much, master. Please forgive my granddaughter, she's stubborn and obstreperous." "Don't blame her," said the old man respectfully. Even though Lin Feng's cultivation level was similar to his, he knew he couldn't compete with Lin Feng's sword. Therefore, he didn't dare let his granddaughter call him brother. He had to remain vigilant. "It's all right. Just call me Lin Feng, mister. This young girl is nice, and I am young, too. She can call me brother," said Lin Feng politely. The young woman made a face and the old man laughed, also jumping onto the fire lion. He wasn't worried that Lin Feng would do anything to them or request anything. Lin Feng was too strong. He didn't need to make them mount his lion to attract them. He found he trusted the young man. He was definitely honest and kind-hearted. The fire lion sped forwards, his bestial chi filling the air around them. In the sky, many people watched the beast strangely, wondering at its strength. Just like the old man, everybody thought the young man had to be from a wealthy and powerful family, or he wouldn't have had such a powerful beast even though he was still a cultivator of the Huang Qi layer. The fire lion was a great imperial beast. When Lin Feng captured it, it took great efforts. Finally, the lion had submitted. It was no wonder the crowd had the same thoughts as the old man. "Brother, you come from a city near Godly Cloud City?" asked the young woman. "No. I'm from the Dark Night region," replied Lin Feng. The young woman's beautiful eyes twinkled. "How far? You actually come from another region. Is the Dark Night region the same as Godly Clouds?" "The same goal can be reached using different routes. The Dark Night region is less complex. There aren't millions of clans fighting and competing all the time. The average strength is also lower than in Godly Clouds. Godly Clouds is in the center of the continent, so of course it's the most powerful region. But you come from the Dark Night region, and you're extremely strong," brother. You must be an incredible public figure, smiled the young woman. The three people chatted freely before they arrived at the eastern gate. The people who were flying all landed there. People had to pass through the gate, entering the city while flying was prohibited. We're at the eastern gate, the most important one. Once you cross the gate, you're really in town. I hope we're not too late, said the old man, looking at the gate. There was an empty space gate there, and he naturally understood what it meant. Many people had gathered there. Some people managed to cross the gate, while many others were refused entry. Go, you can go, Lin Feng smiled. The old man nodded. My granddaughter is quite talented, I'll try first, and if I can go in, she'll definitely be authorized entry, too. Then, the old man walked to the gate, but unfortunately, he was refused access. He came back disappointed and said, we've been traveling for a year, and unfortunately, I was refused entry. Never mind. Let's walk around the city and enjoy the landscapes, said the young woman to cheer him up. She didn't want to go into the city without her grandfather. I'll take you in, said Lin Feng, releasing chi around the two people. He had them enter his spirit world. He walked up to the gate with the lion. They crossed over and entered the central city of the continent of the 9 clouds. The old man and the young woman reappeared, now inside the city. As they stood there, Lin Feng and the fire lion were already far away. They hadn't even had time to react to what had happened. Chapter 2134, Skill Eastern Town was in the eastern part of Godly Cloud City, hence the name. It was just a district within the city, but it was still gigantic. There were millions of clans and other kinds of influential groups. It was also divided into many sub-districts. The political situation was complex. Of course, there were a few groups at the top who looked down on the rest of the city. The strongest groups were probably backed up by the shrines, so they were essential for the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. After all, the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds was in the inner part of Godly Cloud City. Not everybody could go there, and not everybody could participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. There would have been billions of people if so, and the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds would have been much less interesting. Precisely for that reason, each time a shrine organized the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, the strongest groups of the 12 cities had to be strict and check the potential participants. Of course, most people didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. However, when people came to Godly Cloud City, they always realized it was a mysterious place, a holy place for cultivation. Godly Cloud City had to be an incredible place because the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds took place there. It was easier to keep up to date with the news there. Lin Feng had already released the old man and his granddaughter in town. By doing so, some people had probably noticed him, so he had to leave quickly. He departed quickly and was now walking on the main road. There were people all around. Lin Feng kept glancing around, having millions of thoughts. How many years had he been practicing cultivation? From the beginning, he would have never thought he'd be walking in the central city of the continent of the 9 clouds someday, Godly Cloud City. The very center of the continent, how incredible. Lin Feng glanced around, noting many people looked enigmatic and unfathomable. Emperors looked like insects here, extremely weak. Most children were emperors already here, which made Lin Feng speechless. But when he saw the shops on both sides of the street, he also understood that they had more resources than anywhere else in the world. He was at the top of the Huang Qi layer, and for that cultivation level, there were many useful items in the shops around him. There were also many auction houses. The powerful clans in those cities also had incredible items. Lin Feng looked at the people around him. Many of them were also observing him. Of course, more people actually looked at his gigantic fire lion. To many people, that lion looked even more incredible than Lin Feng. The beast was a great imperial beast and Lin Feng was just an emperor. But people remained discreet. Nobody tried to offend anyone. They were in Godly Cloud City, not outside. Without knowing someone's background, the best choice was not to offend them. What should you do if you want to participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds? Wondered Lin Feng. Even though he didn't know the exact details, he knew that it was impossible to go to the meeting and participate directly. There had to be a selection process, otherwise the meeting would have lasted forever. A filtering had to be done. Lin Feng continued walking through the city, enjoying the landscapes. An open-air restaurant appeared in his field of vision, with many people chatting on the terrace. Lin Feng smiled and walked over. Restaurants were perfect places to learn the news. Lin Feng went to a table and listened to what people were talking about. He learned some important news in Godly Cloud City. For example, an extremely strong young person from a clan of alchemists had fought against some foreigners. They had bet on pellets and the foreigners had surprisingly won. Many people were startled. The clan was famous in Godly Cloud City, and their young people were extremely strong, but surprisingly, their young clansmen had lost. It was said that they intended to fight again to regain face. After that, he heard people talk more about those young people who had challenged the young alchemist from Godly Cloud City. They were actually from a very powerful clan of alchemists from Red Clouds. They were extremely strong, ambitious, and proud, and dared challenge extremely strong cultivators from Godly Cloud City. They made Red Clouds seem even more prestigious. The news spread quickly everywhere in Godly Cloud City, and many people were talking about it. Of course, people talked about it because both sides were extremely strong. Actually, many foreigners challenged people from Godly Cloud City. People from Godly Cloud City were inherently proud and arrogant. Their clans had existed for a long time in Godly Cloud City. Most foreigners didn't dare challenge people from Godly Cloud City. However, it couldn't be denied that the people who came to Godly Cloud City were extremely strong and talented, and some of them were extraordinary. Their clans were all extraordinary in the other regions of the continent. Lin Feng understood those things perfectly. If anyone tried to provoke Wu Ju, the 13 young beast masters from the animal district, Chu Chun Chiu, or Saint Tianhun in Godly Cloud City, would they submit to humiliation? The best thing to do was to protect oneself, but not to kill the young people from the powerful clans of Godly Cloud City. If their young people didn't die, then their clans could say anything, either. In the restaurant, Lin Feng regretted that he hadn't made Yu Yu come out. Yu Yu was in his spirit world with his family relaxing sometimes. She practiced cultivation to stabilize her foundation. After all, she hadn't reached such a cultivation level relying on her own abilities, she had been granted it with powers. A terrifyingly strong cultivator had sacrificed themselves for her. She had to work on her cultivation constantly to stabilize it. This time, the Destiny Shrine is in charge of organizing the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. The 20 towns chose 4 groups of influence as entranced. Selected people have the competency to participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. There will be many geniuses from ancient holy clans. Of course. There are so many strong cultivators in Godly Cloud City, you can't underestimate any of them. If only one group had selected candidates, it wouldn't have worked. If you go to the different groups, they can either recommend you or not. Many people will be eliminated. Yes, but those who aren't chosen by shrines aren't happy, someone smiled. Are you talking about the Devamara Thunder Clan? Asked someone. Of course. The Devamara Thunder Clan is really strong. They've always been a powerful group of the eastern town. They're incredibly strong. However, they weren't chosen by the shrine, so they are disappointed. A clan which relies on physical strength can't succeed. They were not taken into consideration, that's normal, someone said coldly. Many people giggled, but they didn't contradict him. People from the Devamara Thunder Clan had a terrifying physical strength. There was a crunching sound, startling everyone. They turned around and saw someone wearing a black cloak. He looked furious and released a mighty chi which filled the air. Really insolent, said that person coldly. The Destiny Shrine chose people as they wished, it doesn't mean clans they haven't chosen aren't strong enough. If you dare talk nonsense here again, don't blame me for not being polite. His bones and muscles emitted crackling sounds. He kicked a table, which instantly exploded into dust. He's from the Devamara Thunder clan. The crowd frowned. Those who had just talked up felt chills. They didn't dare say anything anymore. The Devamara Thunder clan was too powerful. What? It's forbidden to talk here, said someone else at that moment. He looked bestial and ice-cold, and still had his glass in his hand. It's the one who just criticized the Devamara Thunder clan, thought the crowd. The person from the Devamara Thunder clan looked at him and said coldly, which animal clan has such insolent little beasts? Beast? The crowd looked at the young person. The man put his glass down. He actually did look like a beast. Show me how physically strong the members of the Devamara Thunder clan are, said that man as he stood up. The young person of the Devamara Thunder clan jumped forward, the air thickened as he shouted loudly. Terrifying Kulpa lights shone out. Black arcs of electricity moved towards the animal at full speed, like millions of snakes. What a powerful chi, that's an aggressive skill. An armor made of scales appeared around the bestial young man. He looked ferocious, and his physical strength was incredible. He was a dragon rhinoceros. The two fighters collided, their energies blotting out the sky. People were talking about battles just before, they hadn't thought they'd see one so quickly. Lin Feng was quietly astonished. He looked up at the sky and saw dazzling Kulpa lights. Kulpa indestructible Devamara skill. Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. The Devamara Thunder clan practiced the same skill as him, or more precisely, the skill he was studying probably came from that clan. Chapter 2135, Agitation. Lin Feng watched the battle. He realized that the cultivator of the Devamara Thunder clan practiced the Kulpa indestructible Devamara skill and had mastered it better than him. Even though he practiced the skill, he only had a part of it. At the D-Chi layer, he wouldn't be able to practice it anymore. He also rarely relied on skills to fight. He relied on skills to level up, and to improve his strength and soul strength. But the cultivator of the Devamara Thunder clan was different. He had an advanced knowledge and understanding of the Kulpa indestructible Devamara skill. There were many details Lin Feng didn't know about. That guy also used several special powers and special sorts of strength from the skill. After all, the Devamara Thunder clan was the clan who had created the Kulpa indestructible Devamara, and Lin Feng couldn't compete with them. Of course, Lin Feng didn't rely on skills that much. The bestial-looking young man was also terrifying. His physical strength was also great, so he didn't fear his opponent. Their battle made the earth and sky tremble. It drew many people's attention, who rushed over to spectate. It's a member of the Devamara Thunder clan against a member of the Rhinoceros Head clan. Many people recognized the two fighters. The Devamara Thunder clan was a clan from the eastern town in Godly Cloud City. They were very famous here. The Rhinoceros Head clan's members were mixed, they had human and animal characteristics. They were brutal and extremely strong. Everybody says that the members of the Devamara Thunder clan have an incredible physical strength, but I don't think they're as strong as people think, whispered someone. Many people turned their heads and looked at the one who had just talked. He was young and wearing fine clothes. It's them. They like to talk idly about important matters, someone snorted in amusement. Everybody recognized that young man. Pellet King's clan, those people are extremely strong alchemists, but a short time ago, one of their members lost. Now they want to regain face, thought the crowd. Many people were talking about them in the eastern town of Godly Cloud City. The Pellet King's clan was a king clan and didn't like losing face. So they had to provoke, battle, and regain face. The Pellet King's clan's leaders might not even care about young people's battles, but their young people were proud and couldn't accept their defeat. When Lin Feng heard those people, he understood those young people from the Pellet King's clan. He immediately had one thought. Mu Chen's soul wasn't completely healed. Saint Qin Shan also needed an incredible remedy to recover. Perhaps that clan could help him. However, to obtain medicine from the Pellet King's clan wouldn't be easy. If an ordinary person tried to get close to them, they would probably think that person was trying to take advantage of them and their resources. The battle was getting more and more explosive. The cultivator of the Devamara Thunder clan was surrounded by Devamara Kulpa lights. Terrifying Kulpa lights descended from the sky unceasingly and invigorated him. He borrowed the strength of the Kulpa lights to fight. He seemed to be becoming stronger and stronger. That's how terrifying the Kulpa indestructible Devamara skill can get when you have the full set, thought Lin Feng. He didn't have the full set, he just had a part of it. But he had still benefited a lot from it. The young man of the Rhinoceros Head clan was extremely strong, but in the end he lost. He was smashed away and coughed up blood. He looked at his opponent and said, "Next time, we'll have the opportunity to fight again." Furious, he left the place. The crowd looked at the young man of the Devamara Thunder clan, many people's eyes filled with admiration. He was extremely strong. No wonder everybody admired their clan. Their demon skills were impressive. At that moment, the young man looked at the members of the Pellet King's clan and smiled icily. "Losers dare talk about me? Ridiculous. Is that so? You have a powerful physical body, so what? You don't know spells," said a young man of the Pellet King's clan, stepping forwards. Everybody was excited. This young man from the Pellet King's clan had the strength of the top of the Huang Qi layer and was considered extremely strong within his own clan. His name was Wang Sheng. "Wang Sheng, you want to fight against me to regain your face? Why don't you go and find Lei Dong Tian," said the young man of the Devamara Thunder clan. He knew that this cultivator was extremely strong. He was one of the best young people of the Pellet King's clan. Even his physical strength was impressive. "I will when I have the opportunity. Regarding the defeat last time, it was just an accident. If I had been there, we wouldn't have lost, especially against someone from Red Clouds," said Wang Xing indifferently. Then, he waved his hand and fire appeared. The air around him turned scorching hot, his arm turned into flames, and there were fissures on his skin. He looked quite daunting. "Besides, I will use physical strength, not fire or pellet techniques, so for someone like you, fighting against me using physical strength should be easy." Wang Xing smiled. Now that he had said that, the young man of the Devamara Thunder clan couldn't refuse anymore. He said coldly, "All right, we'll try." He chopped down and Devamara Kulpa strength descended from the sky and struck his arm. His arm became black, filled with demon lights. Some Devamara Kulpa lightnings also struck him unceasingly. Crackling and sizzling sounds spread in the air. "I'm going to attack." Wang Xing turned into a beam of light, looking like a shooting star. Some people felt like they were hallucinating. Fireballs crashed onto the strong cultivator from the Devamara Thunder clan, and he punched them away. The cultivator of the Devamara Thunder clan was forced away and pulled a long face. His arm, and especially his fist, felt extremely sore. Some strength had even penetrated into his arm. "That's not physical strength, that's just trickery," said someone at that moment. Lin Feng turned around and saw two men and two women. They looked furious. "Why?" Lin Feng smiled and asked those people. He said he'd use physical strength, but he secretly used fire energy. Alchemists control fire Dao, it's extremely strong. Using physical strength against them is dangerous, and it's easy to get injured, explained a young man coldly. He didn't whisper, everybody could hear him. The group's white clothes fluttered in the wind. They looked extremely strong and extraordinary, inherently noble. They didn't look like ordinary people at all. They wouldn't dare talk that way if it were the case, anyway. As expected, Wang Sheng looked at them and said, "It's them." The young people of the Pellet King's clan stepped forwards at the same time and released an ice-cold energy. "So what? You want to try again and compare our medical competences? Last time, you lost, and now you challenged someone and said you'd use physical strength, but in the end you didn't." The four of them stepped forwards fearlessly and chi filled the air. They were probably from the same clan as the one who had defeated the young man of the Pellet King's clan the previous time. "Since you like to resort to trickery, let's resort to trickery. We can compare ourselves in terms of medical concoctions, but before that, let's compare our strength. You can also resort to trickery," sneered Wang Xing, proud and arrogant. Flames suddenly appeared all around him. They looked like dazzling dragons. "If you want to fight, then fight." All of the people looked proud and arrogant. They all released fire. There's a different kind of chi in their fire. Wang Sheng's fire contains absorbing and piercing strength. Those people's fire is explosive, brutal, and soft at the same time. The cultivation world can be very strange sometimes. Even alchemists have different types of fire. Their fire is condensed and contains hidden strength, murmured Lin Feng. Wang Xing frowned and looked at those four people, then smiled and said, "No rush. Let's agree on a time, same place as last time, and then we can fight. What do you think?" The four people smiled coldly. One of them said indifferently, "You want to fight and get your revenge, we accept. We'll see how strong the Pellet King's clan is. You'll see. Since I chose the location, you can choose the time," said Wang Sheng. "In 3 days," replied the people from Red Clouds directly. "All right, I'll wait for you there," Wang Sheng said icily. His jade-green eyes looked at Lin Feng, or more precisely, at Lin Feng's fire lion. "Your Excellency, what would you like to trade for your fire beast?" Wang Sheng asked calmly. That fire lion was a great imperial beast, a fire-type beast. The fire lion roared angrily, looking at Lin Feng. He was a great imperial beast. He understood what those people wanted. "He's my friend. He doesn't want to leave me," said Lin Feng smiled. "Think about it, any price," said Wang Sheng. "No need. I don't want to exchange him," said Lin Feng, petting his fire lion's head. He didn't want to trade away the lion. "Are you sure?" asked Wang Xing insistently. Flames appeared in his hands and he started playing with them. Lin Feng realized that Wang Sheng wasn't very friendly. He said indifferently, "You talk a lot, don't you?" Wang Sheng was stunned and then smiled coolly. "Sorry for annoying you, Your Excellency." He smiled at Lin Feng again, waved and left with his friends. Chapter 2136, Traveling together. Lin Feng watched those people leave and smiled indifferently. The members of the Pellet King's clan weren't easy to talk to, especially since they were furious because of that previous defeat. But most people were probably like that in Godly Cloud City. The strong cultivators from Red Clouds were also proud and arrogant, but they didn't provoke people first. They weren't at home, after all. The strong cultivator of the Devamara Thunder clan hadn't left yet. A young man from Red Clouds looked at him and said, "Your Excellency, don't worry, that guy resorted to trickery and used hidden fire. It's normal if you're injured. In terms of pure physical strength, you are much better." "Yes, I understand. But be careful too. Wang Sheng is sly." "It won't be easy in 3 days, replied the cultivator of the Devamara Thunder clan. The young people from Red Clouds nodded. The one who had just talked smiled happily and said, "Even though the Pellet King's clan is based in Godly Cloud City, we are also descendants of medical kings. We don't fear them. Since we won against them once, we can win twice." The Thunder clan cultivator nodded and looked at Lin Feng. "You just refused to trade your beast with Wang Sheng. Even though he said nothing, you have to be careful. He will probably dispatch people to steal it from you. He loves fire beasts. After all, he could use a fire-type great imperial beast to modify its fire and use it himself. Thank you for warning me, Lin Feng replied politely. Those people from Red Clouds looked at Lin Feng and smiled. Your Excellency, are you a foreigner, too? Lin Feng nodded, I'm from the Dark Knight region. Great, we've already been recommended to an ancient holy clan. If you want to take part in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, you can come with us, said the leader of the group with an open smile. When Lin Feng heard that, he understood what the other meant and smiled too. He didn't refuse. Finding a place to stay was a good thing. He could also inform his fellow disciples. Being recommended to a place was great too. And these people seemed nice. Staying with other people was a good idea considering some people could attack him anytime. Great, I'd love to, Lin Feng agreed. Alright, let's go then, that man grinned. The 5 of them left together. My name is Ru Feng, what's your name? The leader of the group asked. Lin Feng. My name is Ru Yun. Zi Ling. My name is Yao Yao. The youngest woman of the group kept staring at Lin Feng and grinning. Actually, she kept looking at Lin Feng's fire lion, her beautiful eyes were twinkling as she said, I want to steal your fire lion too, his fire makes the atmosphere so cozy. Brother Lin Feng, your clan is so nice to you, they gave you a cute great imperial beast. Lin Feng realized how nice and easygoing these people were. If you like him, you can have him, no problem. Lin Feng smiled. He had captured this great imperial beast to travel. Wang Sheng wanted him to kill him and use his fire, Ao Yao was different so Lin Feng didn't mind giving him to her. Yao Yao's eyes twinkled. She looked at Lin Feng and said, nah, it's alright. Wang Sheng wanted to trade for him, but you refused, why could I have him? Huh, what a nice little girl, Lin Feng grinned. Am I little? Shot back Yao Yao, sticking her tongue out. Lin Feng laughed. Ru Feng and Ru Yun smiled wryly. Their little female fellow disciple had a good temper, and they all liked her. She was their teacher's only daughter, too. She was nice and well educated, otherwise, their teacher wouldn't have let her come to Godly Cloud City. Who's watching us? No need to hide, said Ru Feng at that moment. In the sky, a few people had appeared. They had been watching Lin Feng and the others with their godly awareness, therefore Lin Feng and the others quickly noticed their presence. Of course, those people initially didn't intend to hide. Things happen quickly in Godly Cloud City. Who are you, which clans are you from? Asked Ru Yun, he grunted coldly and stepped forwards. His robe fluttered even though there was no wind. However, those people were looking at Lin Feng. They glanced at Ru Feng and Ru Yun in a cold and detached way and said, this has nothing to do with you. Don't forget the challenge in 3 days. People from the Pellet King's clan. You want to steal people's possessions that much? When Ru Feng heard that person, he understood what he wanted. That person grunted coldly but didn't even look at Ru Feng. He stared at Lin Feng and said, we'll give you a level 3 great imperial weapon, and you give us the fire lion. That's easy and fair, what do you think? Lin Feng frowned. The young man from the Devamara Thunder clan was right. Wang Sheng wanted to cause trouble. Does Wang Sheng not understand our language? Said Lin Feng indifferently. Those people looked at him with murder in their eyes. Qi filled the air. Those people were all great emperors. The people from Red Clouds were extremely strong, and the Fire Lion was a great imperial beast, the Pellet King's clan couldn't possibly send emperors to do this. Really insolent. Since it's that way, let's take it ourselves, the man speaking smiled coldly. Ru Feng and Ru Yun released fire energies towards those people. Their fire was daunting. Brother Lin Feng, get behind me, said Yao Yao, jumping forwards. She also released fire into the air. Her fire was strange and magnificent. How could I let a little girl protect me? Lin Feng shrugged and stepped forwards. He landed next to Ru Feng and Ru Yun and said, "If you attack them with your fire, can you destroy them?" Ru Feng and Ru Yun were surprised. If their fire did reach those great emperors, they were going to die indeed. They were from a clan of alchemists, their fire strength was terrifying, and they also had a fire-type Dao. Naturally. Ru Feng nodded, "If our attack reaches them, they'll die, yes." "Alright, I'll release wind cosmic energies," whispered Lin Feng. Ru Feng and Ru Yun didn't mind. A terrifying hurricane started roaring. Their robes were flapping in the wind, and their speed accelerated. Empty space wind strength and their energies fused together. They frowned. What a powerful wind cosmic energy. Even the great emperors were surprised. At the same time, golden empty space wind energies appeared up in the sky. The great emperors were startled and glanced at one another. Two great emperors shot forwards at the same time, and as they did, an invisible and intangible Dao strength filled the air and moved towards Lin Feng. "Get ready to attack," shouted Lin Feng. Then, his godly awareness glittered. At the same time, golden cosmic energies started intertwining. At the same time, Ru Feng and Ru Yun moved faster than the eye. "Constriction," shouted Lin Feng loudly. In a flash, an empty space hurricane surrounded the two great emperors and constricted them. They both raised their hands to break the deployment spell. At the same time, they started forwards and dazzling fire lights glittered. "Die," shouted Lin Feng coldly. The two cultivators' faces stiffened. A terrifying sword strength lunged towards them from behind at that moment. No, two gigantic golden swords. Their expressions changed. Ru Feng and Ru Yun jumped forwards and broke their attacks, and at the same time, the two cultivators accelerated and drew closer to them. "Explode!" shouted the two cultivators loudly. Their fireballs exploded, and the two golden swords broke apart. However, more whistling sounds spread in the sky. Deployment spell. The two cultivators' faces stiffened. That deployment spell wasn't extremely powerful, and couldn't pose a threat to them, but Ru Feng and Ru Yun oppressed them. Their fireballs could destroy them. One of them pointed at Ru Feng and a fireball shot towards him. At the same time, the other stretched out his arm and the atmosphere started burning. "Die." Lin Feng smiled coldly. In a flash, a death sword moved towards the two great emperors. It was his Nihility sword, a deadly sword. At the same time, empty space deployment lights appeared and evolved. Behind them in the sky, deployment lights started intertwining and blocked their way. "Help!" shouted one of them. In a flash, the other two great emperors frowned and darted forwards to help. "Die." An invisible and intangible death soundwave strength moved towards the first two great emperors and pierced through their eardrums. At the same time, Ru Feng and Ru Yun also arrived, their fireballs shooting towards the great emperors' heads at full speed. "Piss off." The two cultivators' faces had changed drastically. However, their enemies were faster, especially with the deployment spell and the death sword. They could only fight back, they couldn't escape. The two fireballs turned into two terrifying dragons and destroyed their attacks. The fireballs even absorbed their souls as they burned away in a flash. Chapter 2137, Groups of Different Levels. What a powerful fire, I wonder what they used to obtain such a fire. Thought Lin Feng when he saw Ru Feng and Ru Yun's fire, he was impressed. They could easily burn two great emperors to death. However, their fire didn't look aggressive and brutal, it was just deadly. Many cultivators had their own secrets, the celestial remarkable deployment ministry was like that, too. They had their own deployment spells, and the strong cultivators from Red Clouds were like that, also. The two other great emperors stopped moving. Their faces had turned deathly pale. Two great emperors had just been burned to death. Even though they were guards in the Pellet King's clan, they weren't related to the clan by blood. They weren't as strong and talented as the direct descendants of the clan, but they were still great emperors from godly Cloud City, so they were really strong, and now 2 great emperors had been killed so quickly. Go back and inform Wang Sheng that if he has more sly methods to deal with people, he can wait 3 days and use them then. I can't believe he sent assassins to steal things, that's so pitiful, sneered Ru Feng coldly. The 2 great emperors glanced at one another, turned around, and left. They had underestimated their enemy's strength. 2 great emperors had been killed, and if they continued fighting, they'd die too. Many people had noticed that battle and sighed. Those people from Red Clouds were real geniuses, no wonder they dared fight against people from the Pellet King's clan. They weren't only strong in terms of medicine, but they were also terrifyingly strong fighters. Ru Feng and Ru Yun turned around and looked at Lin Feng, not hiding their surprise. Lin Feng, your deployment spells are so powerful. You can condense cosmic energies to cast deployment spells so quickly, you're already a great scholar. Lin Feng's deployment spells were as advanced as their medical skills. They were already quite strong at their level. Lin Feng wasn't just from a wealthy and powerful clan, he was also extremely talented. A bright future awaited him as a deployment spell caster. Your fire is also very aggressive, Lin Feng returned the compliment. He knew he was already a great scholar in terms of deployment spells, but it was nothing exceptional in his eyes. I wouldn't have thought your deployment spells would be so powerful, brother Lin Feng. Yao Yao grinned. It seems that we're going to succeed in the Yi clan. Yes, brother Lin Feng's deployment spells are incredible, he's a great scholar already. He's also very talented. We can all join hands. However, if we want to become genuine participants of the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, we still need to practice. The meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds takes place every 100 years, there will be many geniuses. Some of them are beasts, but won't be qualified, Ru Yun told them. They all needed to make efforts. Many people didn't have the opportunity to participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, including some people who were considered incredible geniuses. It was normal though. There were geniuses among geniuses. Besides, Wang Sheng, these 4 people, the strong cultivators of the Devamara Thunder clan, all those people were geniuses, but in Godly Cloud City, were they the best? Not necessarily. Even if they didn't manage to stand at the top of the flight of stairs, they could stand on the second. But there were strong cultivators from all regions in Godly Cloud City these days, so many people could stand at the top. Geniuses from the other regions were also the best geniuses in their regions, so how strong were they in comparison to other geniuses in Godly Cloud City? Ru Yun was confident he was a great alchemist and a great fighter, but he didn't overestimate himself. He was sure he didn't have the potential to stand at the very top of the flight of stairs in Red Clouds, so he had even less chances in the other regions of the continent of the 9 clouds. Their group left the area quickly. The Yi clan was an ancient holy clan in Godly Cloud City. They were a level 3 influential group. The shrines had already told everyone who the level 1 influential groups were, the 4 major groups of the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. They were at the very top of the eastern town, and the shrines acknowledged them. It meant that those 4 groups, when they joined hands, were dangerous powers in Godly Cloud City. The shrines didn't try to favor anyone, they did things properly. Those 4 clans could send some people to the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, they had allocated positions. They could also go to the inner city to spectate. However, numerous people had come to Godly Cloud City from abroad. They couldn't rely solely on strength to select them, it was too difficult and almost impossible to evaluate. They needed to collaborate with smaller clans to choose people who were strong enough could then be evaluated by the 4 biggest clans. Those smaller clans were the so-called level 3 groups. The level 2 groups were strong, but the shrines hadn't acknowledged them. They didn't want to belittle themselves and make concessions. The Devamara Thunder clan and the Pellet Kings clan belonged to the category of the so-called Level 2 groups. The Yi clan had many strong cultivators, but many of them had a cultivation level which belonged to the third level. They had few high-level emperors, great emperors, and celestial emperors. But why did they need level 3 people and not other emperors? Because if you hadn't reached that level, 100 years from now, you couldn't possibly have the opportunity to join, even geniuses. If someone hadn't become a high-level emperor at the time of the meeting, then 100 years later, they had to be celestial emperors. Few people became celestial emperors, and if anyone managed to become a saint emperor within 100 years, they could just go directly to a shrine. How lively! I'm sure the other ancient holy clans are also as lively, thought Lin Feng when he entered the Yi clan. There were many strong cultivators present, and their qi was extraordinary. Among the people who wanted to join the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, none were weaklings. "Brother Ru Feng, you came back," exclaimed a young man at that moment. Ru Feng and the others smiled happily to see him. They all looked close. "Brother Yi, let me introduce you, it's my new friend Lin Feng. He's like us, he came here to participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. We recommended him to the Yi clan," said Ru Feng, smiling at the young man. Then, he looked at Lin Feng and said, "This is Yi Ning from the Yi clan. Since Brother Ru Feng wants to recommend him, I'm sure Brother Lin Feng is trustworthy. But we need to explain a few things to him. No matter who comes to the Yi clan, they must go through an application process so that we can recommend them to the 4 biggest groups. We have to be responsible. The meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds is very important. Don't feel offended, Brother Lin Feng. Please abide by the rules, Brother Yi," replied Lin Feng with a polite smile. He couldn't get offended because of the rules. The Yi clan would be the first step, so he had to go through the application process. Then, he'd have to take the exam of the 4 clans, and if he succeeded, he'd be authorized to participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. "Thank you very much for your understanding, Brother Lin," said Yi Ning, shaking hands with Lin Feng. He grinned and said, "Come, there are more and more geniuses in the Yi clan these days. They can all gather and talk freely about cultivation. There are people from every region of the continent of the 9 clouds, they all have a different understanding of cultivation. Exchanging and learning from one another is very beneficial for all. Alright, let's go." Ru Feng nodded. Yi Ning took them to a vast place with a martial arts stage. Many people were seated cross-legged in front of it. Yi Ning smiled and told them, "The atmosphere is spectacular when so many geniuses gather around a stage like this." Lin Feng's eyes twinkled. He studied all those people seated cross-legged. They all looked extraordinary. Seeing so many strong cultivators around a stage was only possible in Godly Cloud City. There were hundreds of geniuses here. They were talking about cultivation, some of them about things they didn't agree on. Some people were also standing on the battle stage and fighting. Those who lost naturally left. Lin Feng, when the Yi clan tells us to exchange views on cultivation with others, it means that if we fail, we are eliminated and we can leave, said Ru Feng to Lin Feng telepathically. Lin Feng understood that. So many geniuses were here, all of them ambitious and proud. If they disagreed on something, they could compare themselves, and the losers could leave. Ru Feng and the others were foreigners. They sat down. Ru Feng talked about fire and medicine. Lin Feng talked about deployment spells. How could they not want to compare themselves? Brother Lin Feng, it's your first day here, have a seat, said Yi Ning smiled. Lin Feng nodded, nature would take its course. Lin Feng sat down somewhere with Ru Feng and the others. Lin Feng's great imperial beast was seated behind him, calmly and peacefully. Cultivators' 3 energies determine their temper. If their 3 energies are powerful, they are talented, such people can practice cultivation free from inhibitions and happily. Such people can progress without hindrance. Breaking through is easy for them. If a cultivator's three energies are not harmonious, if they are distracted, how can they progress? Only people who are talented can fight properly, said someone at that moment slowly. He didn't talk loudly, but everybody heard him. It was his own view of cultivation. Chapter 21:38, First Master. After that, many people smiled. They understood what he meant. Everything was important on the path of cultivation. The three energies he spoke of were blood strength, physical strength, and Tao strength. They couldn't lack any of it, but it was normal that cultivators had to focus on one of them sometimes. Everybody progressed differently. Many people liked to focus on one and considered it the most important. Maybe some people just tried to convince themselves, too. Without good physical strength, how can you have the body of a saint? How can you transcend worldliness and attain holiness? Spoke up someone else, smiling indifferently and not sparing a glance for the person who had just talked. The one who had just talked said nothing, but stared at him. He was waiting. Cultivators seek enlightenment. The kiliacosm of the great Tao contains the 10,000 things of creation. Only people who break free from the kiliacosm of the great Tao can transcend worldliness and attain holiness, said that person calmly. He was talking about Tao and principles. He sounded emotionless. He was saying something completely different from the first one who had just talked. The first one sounded free and unrestrained, he looked like a person like that. The other one was handsome and had no expression, looking cold and emotionless. So what you mean is that your Tao is more powerful than mine, said the first person, looking at the one who looked emotionless. He sounded indifferent. Stronger than yours, at least, replied the second in the same tone. He sounded confident and sure. So let's try and we'll see, smiled the first one coldly. He knew the other really wanted to try. In the Yi clan, you can't kill people. We are guests here. I'll give the Yi clan face, because when I fight, I'm emotionless, said the second one. He was saying that he didn't want to fight because he wanted to give the Yi clan face. When he fought, it was to kill. The other one was surprised and pulled a long face. He looked at Yi Ning and said, Yi Ning, can we battle to death, please? Yi Ning pulled a long face. He looked at them, smiled wryly and nodded, since you are both so determined, please do. But the best would still be not to kill anyone. The crowd understood that Yi Ning was saying that to be polite. Actually, he didn't really care about those people's death. He was there to select fighters. Losers were eliminated. For him, whether those people died or were eliminated, there was no difference. He was just the leader of the eastern part. The Yi clan prohibited battles to death just to avoid ending up in a chaotic situation. If both sides agreed, they had no objection. That cultivator suddenly stood up when he heard that, and suddenly, his three energies surged explosively towards the other young man. He jumped forwards and a terrifying energy moved towards his opponent. He wanted to attack his enemy's heart and soul. His energies were explosive. That guy is extremely strong. He must be as strong as the strong cultivator of the Devamara Thunder Clan's cultivator. He's a real genius, observed Ru Feng calmly. However, Yao Yao laughed and said, Brother Ru Feng, you're definitely stronger than him. Ru Feng laughed, giving a noncommittal reply. The emotionless cultivator finally stood up and released his qi calmly. There was no terrifying qi. However, at that moment, he took a step forwards and emotionless energies started humming. How cold! The emotionless fighter's energies were icy cold. Everybody felt chilled. People had the impression they were becoming heartless. Emotionlessness Tao. Ru Feng and the others looked startled. This guy was extremely strong, he was stronger than his opponent, who thus had to be extremely vigilant. The emotionless fighter's energies had fused together with the earth and sky, resonating with the cosmos. On the path of cultivation, Tao is the most important thing. Being emotionless is a perfect way to achieve enlightenment, said that person calmly. His energies continued resonating with the earth and sky. He took another step forwards, emotionless intent emerging from his body and piercing through his opponent's body, sapping away his emotions. The one who attached more importance to the three energies was oppressed, his face turned deathly pale. The emotionless intent surrounded him. On the path of cultivation, Tao is the most important thing. Being emotionless is a perfect way to achieve enlightenment. That was arrogant, wild, and violent. It resonated all around the stage. Die, the first one shouted explosively, his three energies surging out as his rage spiked. He wanted to destroy the emotionless energies, but the emotionless cultivator took another step, millions of threads of emotionless energies piercing through his body. Emotionlessness Tao is unstoppable. Not even the earth and sky can stop it, said the emotionless cultivator flatly. His energies still resonated with the earth and sky. He took another step. The opponent's three energies and Tao power were instantly destroyed. Finally, he was left standing there without any chi. How strong! When the crowd saw that, they were astonished and frowned. This guy was terrifying. They were all geniuses, they came from everywhere in the continent of the 9 clouds. But they all thought this guy was a real genius. He had just killed another genius easily, nothing could stop emotionless Tao. The emotionless energies disappeared. Lin Feng finally understood why Empress she had made Xiao Yu Xian practice emotionless cultivation. Xiao Yu Xian hadn't managed to become that strong, but emotionlessness cultivation was extremely powerful and terrifying. This guy had just proved it. 3,000 threads of emotionless strength, the 3,000 deadly technique, Prince Wuqing, your Prince Wuqing. Exclaimed someone at that moment, looking rather stunned. Everybody's expression changed, and were staring at him. Those people came from the Dark Night region, so they recognized him, but people from other regions didn't. Was Prince Wuqing very famous? In the continent of the 9 clouds, there were 9 regions, with little communication between them. Therefore, even though Prince Wuqing was famous in the continent of the 9 clouds, few people knew him in other regions. Wuqing glanced at the speaker indifferently and went back to where he was seated before. He looked calm and aloof. Even though he didn't confirm it, everybody understood who he was. Prince Wuqing was the first master of the Dark Night region. No wonder he was extremely strong. That young man stood at the top of the Dark Night region among emperors. Even on the stage of the Yi clan, he had displayed his strength. Prince Wuqing is very famous. Yao Yao's eyes twinkled. Lin Feng said, Prince Wuqing is the first master of the Dark Night region, so he's famous, yes. First master of the Dark Night region? No wonder he's so strong. He killed a genius with Tao power. Ru Feng looked stunned. That guy's strength was really impressive. Brother Lin Feng, you're also from the Dark Night region, who is stronger between you and Prince Wuqing? Asked Yao Yao, smiling. Yao Yao rebuked Ziling, rolling his eyes. She didn't think before talking. Since Wuqing was the first master of the Dark Night region, how could there be anyone stronger than him at the same cultivation level? We've never fought, so I don't know, replied Lin Feng with a smile. Yao Yao grinned and gave Ziling a mocking look. Many people remained silent because of Prince Wuqing. Yi Ning had already asked someone to dispose of the corpse. However, nobody said anything. They hadn't thought the first master of a region would be there, in the Yi clan. Don't feel awkward, continue talking about cultivation. If you don't feel like talking, please tell me about the first masters of each region, I'd be happy to know more, said Yi Ning breaking the silence and smiling. Brother Yi Ning, who's the first master of godly clouds? Asked someone. Right, godly clouds is the central region, geniuses mostly come from here. There are many geniuses here. I also want to know about the first master of godly clouds, said someone else. They all wanted to know more about the geniuses of godly clouds. After all, so many strong cultivators of the Huangqi layer had gathered there, people of other cultivation levels were together. Godly Clouds was the central part of the continent of the 9 clouds, so of course, there were more geniuses there. Were the strongest cultivators of Godly Clouds stronger there? For example, who was the strongest master of the 9 regions? The first master of Godly Clouds? Yi Ning smiled and gazed into the distance in a solemn and respectful way. One could see he admired the first master of Godly Clouds as well. The first master of Godly Clouds comes from Holy Mountain. Almost everyone who comes from there is a genius. Most of our apex geniuses also come from there, said Yi Ning, smiling thinly. Everybody looked solemn and respectful at his words. Holy Mountain, some people had heard about it before. Chapter 2139, Wuqing's words. Holy Mountain was a legendary place for Godly Clouds. The name itself showed how incredible they were. Holy. The ultimate goal of Holy Mountain's people was to become a saint. Even some people from other regions of the continent of the 9 clouds had heard of Holy Mountain. The first master of Godly Clouds was from Holy Mountain. Their saints, Buddhist monks, Confucianist monks, sword cultivators, and so forth, are all famous. People from Holy Mountain who are not extraordinarily strong can't come down the mountain, and if they do, they're not allowed to say they're from Holy Mountain. Therefore, when people from Holy Mountain show up, they are all incredibly strong and talented. The first master of Godly Clouds is not just a Confucianist or a sword cultivator, he's a Confucianist sword cultivator, explained Yi Ning solemnly. People were startled. A Confucianist, that was extremely rare in the continent. Their strength was particular, and their spirit was rare. Confucianist monks mostly had book spirits and studied Confucian scriptures. They strictly enforced the principles they learned in the Holy Scriptures, and they studied the origin of the 10,000 things of creation. Confucianist monks were even rarer than Buddhist monks. The 3 most famous types of cultivators in Holy Mountain were Buddhist monks, Confucianist monks, and sword cultivators. The first master of Godly Clouds was both a Confucianist monk and a sword cultivator. Hua Qingfeng practices both Confucianism and sword cultivation. At the same time, he also understands 2 types of Tao strength. The first one is celestial sound Tao. One word can turn into the 10,000 things of creation, one word can kill thousands of people. His voice is his Tao. The second one is deadly, his sword obeys, his speech protects his sword. He's a killer, he can make anything change in the world. King Ning Ri doesn't even dare offend Hua Qingfeng. People think he's going to be a saint. When the crowd heard about Hua Qingfeng, they frowned. How formidable! King Ning Ri didn't even dare offend Hua Qingfeng, a future saint. Many people looked at Prince Wuqing. He was the first master of the Dark Night region. Was he weaker than Hua Qingfeng? Many people started thinking they were weak. They had the impression they would never be able to compete with people like those first masters. Actually, they were right, none of them could compete with the first masters. 2 types of Tao. The first master of Godly Clouds must be terrifyingly strong, considered Lin Feng thoughtfully. He thought about his opponents. This time, at the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, he would see the 9 first masters of the continent of the 9 clouds, and he would also see the first ladies, although he didn't know whether they could compete with the first masters though. There would also be those strange creatures who had come back to life, like the one with the spiritual deployment body or Saint Tianhu. Those people were also terrifying, and then there were also the 13 young beast masters, and Chu Chunqiu. Lin Feng felt more determined when thinking about them. He was rising alongside such people. Those people were going to fight, and their battles would be magnificent and spectacular. Of course, even though the first masters are extremely strong, many geniuses will come and participate in the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, and some people might defeat them. Every time, some masters are defeated. The best showing for the masters was one time when 4 of them ended up in the top 10, which is less than half of them. Maybe a potential first master is among us today, said Yi Ning, smiling happily when he saw that everyone remained silent. Everybody came back to their senses and stopped daydreaming. For masters in the top 10, that was their best performance. There must be terrifying cultivators at the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. Thought many people. But they didn't take Yi Ning's words seriously, either. Even if the 10 masters didn't manage to all end up in the top 10, they probably all ended up in the top 20 or 30, which was already incredible. Many of them couldn't even imagine achieving that. After all, even though they were strong, they didn't consider themselves the strongest cultivators of the continent of the 9 clouds. The first master of red clouds is a genius. Naturally, he's also an alchemist. He's a great fighter and a great alchemist, Jiuling Huang. He has studied 9 sorts of spirits, and 9 sorts of fires. He can make the skies burn, and when his 9 fires fuse together, his spirits change. His powers are explosive. He can burn many ordinary great emperors to death, said Ru Yun. Many people were startled. Alchemists understood fire really well. Everybody knew that, as without a powerful fire, people couldn't become alchemists. Since those people were from powerful clans of alchemists, they couldn't be weak. The first master of red clouds was probably terrifying strong. Hi, Jiuling Huang's medicine techniques are also incredible. Many alchemists of the Di-Chi layer often ask him for pieces of advice, said Yao Yao, giggling next to Lin Feng. Lin Feng laughed when he heard her. These people were king's descendants. They probably knew the first master of red clouds quite well. They all seemed to have the greatest esteem for Jiuling Huang. And from Yao Yao's facial expression, it was easy to guess she liked him. I'm from Supreme Clouds, the first holy Taoist temple. We train terrifying cultivators there. The first master also comes from there, said someone solemnly next. He looked at Prince Wuqing and said, the first master of Supreme Clouds, Wuxia, is sly and evil. He practices supreme skills and techniques, such as the supreme emotion-destroying technique. He destroys people's 7 emotions and 6 sensory pleasures. In other words, he destroys their personalities and turns them into puppets. Supreme emotion-destroying technique. The crowd frowned. Another terrifying cultivator who could destroy people's 7 emotions, 6 sensory pleasures, and personalities. A cultivator from the first holy Taoist temple. So his cultivation was similar to Wuqing's. No wonder he was looking at Prince Wuqing. It's alright, let's stop talking about those things. We'll see those people on the stage of the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, said someone at that moment calmly. Everybody looked at him, but Yi Ning smiled and said, good, I'm sure everybody has the potential to pass the exam. You'll see the first masters. Maybe some people here can even defeat them. There are many geniuses in the 9 regions of the continent of the 9 clouds. The first masters aren't the only ones. For example, I come from the Dark Night region before I came to Godly Clouds. In Chi Tian Holy Town, the Animal District, an ancient holy clan, showed how strong they were. They have 7 people who are at the top of the Huang Chi layer, and they're terrifyingly strong, spoke up someone. People from the Dark Night region all nodded. Indeed, it was said that apart from Wu Ju and some others who could compete with the young beast masters, all the geniuses of Chi Tian Holy Town couldn't, which proved how terrifyingly strong those young beast masters were. Don't forget the 2 geniuses from the Holy City, Chu Chunqiu and Lin Feng. They both stepped onto the Holy Spirit Dynasty's Holy Way stage. They're terrifyingly talented. When the young beast masters showed up last time, Lin Feng fought against one of them in a furious battle. Yes, Lin Feng is really terrifying. Back then, even Ji Chang and 7 other geniuses didn't manage to kill him. He's almost invincible, said the people of the Dark Night region. People from the other regions didn't know him, they only knew geniuses from their own regions. The Dark Night region wasn't the only place which had such geniuses. The geniuses of the Dark Night region are famous in the Dark Night region only. In the continent of the 9 clouds, maybe they won't be considered geniuses anymore, rebutted someone indifferently. Some people didn't care about other people's regions. However, Ru Feng and the 3 others were staring at Lin Feng. Everybody was talking about him. Yi Ning was peering at Lin Feng. That was the Lin Feng those people were talking about. "Brother Lin Feng, are they talking about you?" asked Yao Yao, smiling and giggling. When the members of the Dark Night region heard her, they all looked surprised and looked over at Lin Feng. They looked at Lin Feng's face and cold lights appeared in some people's eyes. "Lin Feng, that's you." That person had already seen Lin Feng during a battle back in the days. He was surprised to see both Lin Feng and Prince Wuqing there. "Indeed, I'm Lin Feng," said Lin Feng nodding. He didn't lie. At that moment, Prince Wuqing looked over at Lin Feng. Everybody knew Lin Feng in the Dark Night region, he was famous. "Lin Feng," said Prince Wuqing suddenly. Everybody was surprised. Prince Wuqing was cold, and surprisingly he took the initiative to talk. Lin Feng looked over at Prince Wuqing. Prince Wuqing said indifferently, "Lin Feng, after you became famous, I heard that some people said you were probably as strong as Wu Ju. They also compare you and Wu Ju with me. They say you both have the potential to replace me as the first master of the Dark Night region." Then, he smiled indifferently and suddenly burst into laughter. He didn't look nice at all though, he looked cruel and sly. Lin Feng laughed. He couldn't prevent people from talking. Some people had compared Wu Ju with Wu Qing in front of him in the past. Even though I think they're ridiculous. I hope that people like Wu Ju and you won't disappoint me. At least, I won't be the only one from the Dark Night region to stand at the top. I hope other people from the Dark Night region will stand by my side at the top, said Prince Wuqing unconcernedly. Then, he stood up and walked away. He said calmly, "Yi Ning, if there's nothing important, don't disturb me." Chapter 2140, Exchanging about swords. After Prince Wuqing left, the crowd broke up in discord again. Some people left on their own. The Yi clan was in charge of the eastern town, so they had obviously prepared some places for Lin Feng and the others. Since Ru Feng, Ru Yun, and the others were close to the Yi clan prepared a nice courtyard for Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't leave, he stayed there, practiced cultivation calmly and talked to his fellow disciples at the same time. Ho Qing Lin and the others had arrived in Godly Cloud City, but they were in different towns. They decided not to gather yet, after careful consideration. They would meet on the stage of the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds. If any of their group failed to be accepted as a participant, they would wait in Godly Cloud City. Regarding Mu Chen and Jing Xiaoyu, Lin Feng closely monitored their movements because the saint was with them. They were the only ones who hadn't arrived in Godly Cloud City yet. Mu Chen didn't intend to join the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, he just wanted to come to Godly Cloud City to enjoy the city, and his time with Jing Xiaoyu. Lin Feng was seated on a stone chair in his courtyard, watching Ru Feng and Ru Yun concoct potions, medicine, pellets. Lin Feng had studied medicine before, but he had quickly given up for various reasons. He wanted to focus on cultivation and had nobody to teach him, and he didn't have good ingredients either, so he had eventually stopped. But now, seeing those people, Lin Feng realized that medicine could be impressive too. What these people were doing was completely different from what he had studied back then. "Brother Lin Feng, you think concocting pellets is fun?" asked Yao Yao, coming over to Lin Feng while laughing. "I wonder how strong you are at concocting potions and pellets. Ru Feng, Ru Yun, and Zi Ling are all studying and you're being lazy," retorted Lin Feng cheerfully. Yao Yao stuck out her tongue and pouted, then sat down next to Lin Feng and said smiling, "They all say I'm lazy. Brother Lin Feng, in the Dark Night region, you're quite famous. I guess you're extremely strong, right? Prince Wuqing is arrogant, can you beat him or not?" Lin Feng was surprised this little girl was so curious. I don't know how strong Prince Wuqing is. I don't know if I could defeat him or not, replied Lin Feng shrugging. You're right, said Yao Yao, nodding, then smiled and said, but I'm sure my brother can beat him. Your brother? Lin Feng looked at Yao Yao. She had faith in her brother. Prince Wuqing was the first master of the Dark Night region. He was definitely extremely strong. He practiced emotionless cultivation. His 3,000 threads of emotionlessness strength constituted the basics of his 3,000 deadly technique. He was extremely strong. But this little girl said, with deep and profound kindness, that her brother was extremely strong. Yes, my brother is extremely strong, said Yao Yao with a broad smile. Lin Feng just nodded, giving a noncommittal reply, all right, I hope I'll meet him someday. Someone strode abruptly into the courtyard. Lin Feng was surprised and cold lights appeared in his eyes. When that person sensed Lin Feng's cold gaze, he stopped and stood there. He said to Lin Feng, we're not in the Dark Night region. I knew you were here, so I came to see you and have a chat. What do you want? Asked Lin Feng indifferently. I want to see how strong you are. I know I can move on to the next step for the meeting of the continent of the 9 clouds, said that person calmly. He had an ancient sword on his back. He was probably a sword cultivator. You came to challenge Brother Lin Feng, said Yao Yao. Her eyes were twinkling as she said, all right, Brother Lin Feng, teach him a good lesson. Lin Feng was speechless. This girl was too enthusiastic. Lin Feng didn't refuse and said, come in, then. The man entered the courtyard and shook hands with Lin Feng. I'm from Tianyuan Ancient City, Wanjianggu Mou. Let's exchange views on cultivation please, Your Excellency. A terrifying sword intent filled the air, as if millions of swords had been unsheathed at the same time. Be careful, said Mou. Yao Yao moved quickly away to give them space to fight. Mou shifted and his sword energies emitted furious humming sounds. An invisible and intangible sword intent filled the air. It was like millions of swords were cutting into the air. Sword lights glittered and the man unsheathed his sword. It was an ordinary sword, but when it appeared in front of Mou, Lin Feng realized it was extraordinary, a king of swords. An endless amount of sword intent emerged from the sword, forming a vortex around it. A terrifying strength pierced right through Lin Feng's skin. That was true sword intent. Even though the man said he wanted to chat and exchange views on cultivation, actually he had come to challenge Lin Feng. Lin Feng didn't mind, though. He just smiled and moved too. He released a towering qi, which condensed into a Holy Spirit sword. Stars appeared in his hands. His fingers turned into sharp swords, containing an incredible sword Dao. Sword cultivators. Ru Feng and Ru Yun stopped concocting pellets and looked at Lin Feng in surprise. Die, shouted Mou loudly. Millions of swords seemed to be condensing before him. His sword seemed like it could cut through space and time. It shot towards Lin Feng. At the same time, Lin Feng's sword also thrust forwards. Lin Feng looked confident and at ease. Then, sharp and clear breaking and snapping sounds spread in the air. In the twinkling of an eye, the sword intent stopped humming. Mou's sword was broken. Lin Feng's sword disappeared as well. However, Lin Feng appeared in front of Mou. He had a sword in his hand, and could easily kill him. The difference between them was too big. How did you do that? Mou asked Lin Feng. Lin Feng smiled and put his sword away. His sword became invisible and intangible. Do you understand? He said to Mou. Mou frowned. He had been practicing sword cultivation for such a long time. However, Lin Feng had just made some simple moves, and had won quickly. I don't really understand, said Mou. He understood a little bit but not everything. Lin Feng hadn't used a sword technique. He hadn't summoned a sword. However, he didn't understand how Lin Feng had moved so fast. The difference between them was too big, and he had suffered a crushing defeat. I've been practicing sword cultivation for so many years. But I'm confused, how do you carry out the best sword attacks? Do you need to use the most powerful sword techniques? Do you need to summon powerful swords? Recently, I suddenly understood that swords have no abstruse energies, no cosmic energies, no Tao. Swords might form a faction in themselves. Sword cultivation is something empty, natural, you just follow your inclinations to practice sword cultivation. I wonder if that's how you transcend worldliness as a sword cultivator. Swords seem to be invisible and intangible, murmured Lin Feng softly. He seemed to be talking to Mou, but at the same time it was like he was talking to himself. However, Mou was astounded by what Lin Feng was saying. His heart started pounding. Were swords supposed to be invisible and intangible? What was his Tao? His own mind? His own inclinations? When you are determined, there's a sword, whispered Mou, as if he couldn't believe it. Indeed, when you are determined, there's a sword, laughed Lin Feng. That's what I think. I don't know if it's useful to you. Mou remained silent, he looked pensive. Then, he looked at Lin Feng and bowed very low. Then, he raised his head, looked at Lin Feng and smiled. Someday, when I understand swords, you will be my teacher. Mou bowed again and walked backwards slowly. He turned around only when he reached the door and departed. Interesting guy, commented Lin Feng. Lin Feng, what you said was beautiful. You're so kind to share your knowledge with other people, said Ru Feng, walking up to Lin Feng. I don't know if I'm right or not. It's just a personal opinion. I haven't had time to check those things. But whether he will succeed or not depends on his fate, said Lin Feng smiling, but that guy is a good sword cultivator. I hope he will reach the clouds. I'd be happy for him. Strange guy, said Yao Yao, pursing her lips. He came to challenge you, and you helped him. It depends on people. If Wang Xing challenges me, it's for other reasons, said Lin Feng breezily. Ru Feng and the others nodded. It was almost time for their challenge. We're not very close to the place where we fought last time. Let's go, said Ru Feng calmly. Everybody nodded and headed out. Wang Sheng, a strong cultivator of the Pellet King's clan, had challenged these people from Red Clouds. Many people knew that, and so today there were even more people there to watch than expected. They wanted to watch this battle between geniuses from two different regions who were all from clans of alchemists. Who would win the second battle? These people from Red Clouds, or the Pellet King's clan? Would the kings regain their face? Chapter 2141, Bet there were 9 towers, lofty and reaching for the clouds. At the top of each tower was a huge empty place. When people concocted potions and remedies there, people could stand around and watch. The previous time, a young man from Red Cloud had defeated a young man from the Pellet King's clan using alchemical techniques. This time, Wang Sheng wanted to fight. Two great families of alchemists, how beautiful would the battle be? They're here. At that moment, people turned around and gazed off into the distance. Ru Feng, Ru Yun, and the others arrived under many eyes. The cultivators from Red Clouds were king's descendants, and didn't flinch. After all, the previous time, they had won. Who's that guy? He's not a descendant of Red Cloud's kings, is he? Asked many people when they saw Lin Feng. Lin Feng noticed that many people were looking at him, but he remained composed. His fire lion was following him calmly. It was funny to see a brutal beast looking so calm. Great imperial beast, it's a great imperial beast. That guy is definitely a descendant of Red Cloud's kings, he has a great imperial beast. Wrong. He's just a random guy hanging out with them. Last time, Wang Sheng wanted to steal his fire lion, but he failed. People from Red Clouds made friends with him and they stayed together, said various other people when they saw Lin Feng. The crowd nodded approval. On the other side, a strong wind started blowing and waves of energies rolled by. Wang Sheng and some people from the Pellet King's clan had arrived. He smiled and said, "Good, you are really king's descendants, you're brave. You dared come. You talk a lot for a loser." "Sometimes, it's better not to have a tongue," rebutted Ziling in icy anger. "Huh, I like it when beautiful women get angry. If we win this time, you'll come back to the Pellet King's clan with me." "You won't go back to Red Clouds," said Wang Xing loudly. His group of friends all burst into laughter. "Don't provoke me. Alchemists should avoid being flighty and impetuous. People like you stand no chance to win," spat Ziling coldly. Wang Xing frowned and smiled icily. "Good, since you're so confident, let's bet, all right. We're in Godly Cloud City, I don't trust you. Therefore, comparing ourselves in terms of alchemical skills is better," replied Ru Yun indifferently. The strong cultivators of the Pellet King's clan all looked angry. Those people dared doubt about them? What was that supposed to mean? Since it's that way, get ready. Same rules as last time, 3 rounds. We'll see who can make the best pellet, all right, said Wang Xing smiling coldly. All right, nodded Ru Feng. The previous time, they had also competed 3 times, the members of Godly Clouds had won once and lost twice. Last time, you lost. This time, we gave you another opportunity to contest, you have to select alchemists first for each round, said Ru Feng indifferently. Wang Xiao replied, all right, no problem. You like to talk nonsense, don't you? If we hadn't given you another opportunity, you wouldn't have had the chance to try again. Be grateful, said Ziling sharply. Humph. Wang Xing grunted coldly. Someone jumped up from behind him and landed on an alchemical tower. A strong wind started blowing. Ru Feng shot up into the sky like a great rock and landed next to that person on the alchemical tower. Wang Xing frowned and said coldly, you're starting. Why can't I, said Ru Feng smiling coldly. All right, you can, no problem. Even if we lose this round, we'll see how you intend to win the next ones, Wang Xing said coldly. The previous time, they had dueled 3 rounds, and everybody learned that Ru Feng was the strongest alchemist. Wang Xing wanted to compete with Ru Feng, but he hadn't thought these people would make Ru Feng go first. Ridiculous. Even if Ru Feng won the first round, so what? They had 2 more rounds to oppress them. Cauldrons appeared. The 2 contestants released special fires, which surrounded the cauldrons. The 2 contestants were both king's descendants. They had access to as many cauldrons and ingredients as they wished, so naturally they could use the best ones. If they were skilled enough, they could concoct the best remedies. Of course, they had agreed on 3 rounds, if they failed to make a pellet, then they lost. Therefore, few people tried to make pellets they weren't used to making. What incredible fire control, thought Lin Feng, watching the 2 contestants. They had already started. Ru Feng's fire turned into 81 flames and surrounded the cauldron. Ru Feng controlled the fire perfectly. His soul was in the cauldron. He wanted to make the best pellet, which required focus. He couldn't be careless if he didn't want to fail. You're here, too. Wang Xing smiled at Lin Feng. Last time, I told you I wanted to trade something for your fire lion, have you thought about it? Lin Feng raised his hand and glanced at Wang Xing, then turned his head away, ignoring him as if he didn't exist. Wang Xing was infuriated. The crowd watched Wang Xing and Lin Feng, and looked amused. Wang Xing looked quite pissed. Wang Xing glanced at some people, who noticed that and instantly left. Wang Xing said, today, we're going to have 3 rounds. You have 5 people. We could embellish our private cultivation with a cultivation battle, too. We've already agreed to duel in terms of alchemical skills. But if you want to fight, no problem, answered Ru Yun. He stepped forwards and qi surged around him. Empty space fire filled the air. Get ready for the next round. You won't fight, we could lose if you don't make a pellet. You don't need to worry. Since it's that way, after you. Wang Zhan, you go, Wang Xing told someone. The guy looked like a terrifying and brutal fighter. His qi was swift and explosive, humming around him. Dying or getting injured is inevitable. Let's bet on the fire lion, said Wang Sheng, staring at Lin Feng's beast. He had failed to steal it last time, he hadn't thought that Ru Feng and Ru Yun were such strong fighters as well. Besides, that little boy could cast deployment spells, Wang Sheng had been very surprised. 2 great emperors had been killed. But Wang Zhan's fighting abilities were incredible, so Wang Sheng had no doubts about him. He didn't like making pellets, he loved fighting. He even scared Wang Sheng. If you lose, what do we get? Said Lin Feng calmly looking at Wang Sheng. He didn't like offending people, but if people wanted to cause trouble, Lin Feng wasn't scared. A great imperial pellet, level 3, what do you think? Replied Wang Sheng indifferently. Lin Feng looked at Ru Feng and asked, are you sure you're going to win the alchemical competition? We are, said Ru Feng, nodding confidently. Brother Lin Feng, don't worry, we'll win, said Yao Yao, clenching her small fists and smiling. Good. I'll put my fire lion at stake then. And a fire lion for a level 3 great imperial pellet, what do you think? Is it worth it? Said Lin Feng. No problem. We're just worried that these guys could resort to sly methods. They'd just humiliate themselves and it would quickly spread in Godly Cloud City. In the worst case, we won't get the pellet, Lin Feng smiled. He then looked at Wang Sheng and asked, you heard me, right? What do you think? Betting a pellet for a fire lion, no problem. You don't dare bet on cultivation though, it seems, observed Wang Sheng, smiling coldly. No rush. One thing after the other, said Lin Feng calmly, I need a level 3 great imperial pellet which helps a cultivator recover when their soul is injured, do you have one? Wang Sheng frowned. A level 3 great imperial soul recovering pellet? Even for him it was a precious pellet. He had only one. That kind of pellet was extremely difficult to make and required a very high level. The success rate was very, very low, so he didn't waste time trying to make such pellets. Will you bet or not? Asked Lin Feng. All right. As you wish, agreed Wang Sheng coldly. What about the bet for the cultivation battle? You probably have something I want. This cauldron and this fire, are you interested? Asked Lin Feng calmly, as a gigantic cauldron with dragon patterns appeared. In his right hand, a perfect fire appeared. It contained different kinds of qi. If I lose you can have these. A heaven dragon cauldron. Wang Sheng was astonished and staring at the cauldron and the fire. He looked enthusiastic and said, I wouldn't have thought you'd have such good things. If I lose, I'll give you a second level 3 great imperial pellet. No, that's not enough, said Ru Feng coldly. You can add something. You'll slap your face 3 times in front of everybody, said Lin Feng calmly. Wang Sheng was shocked and his eyes glittered with cold lights. This fool wanted him to slap his own face in front of everybody. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.